Okay, just let us know when you're ready. Ready? Okay. Good evening, and thank you for joining us both in person here and online. Today is Tuesday, October 25th. We'll go ahead and get started by roll call, please.
Ms. Luna Rose,
Here.
Dr. Ravi,
Here.
Ms. Shaw,
Here.
Ms. Counts, Ms. Grijalva,
Here, let the record show that 4 board members are present and Ms. Counts is absent today. I'm going to go ahead. The next item on the agenda is land acknowledgement, and I'm going to turn it over to Board Member Shaw.
Okay. Hello, everyone. So I'm very honored today because my daughter is in the house and she's going to be reading the land acknowledgement. Salome, come on up to the podium, honey.
Cute.
How are you, honey? Good.
You can pull that mic down.
Yeah, do you want to pull it down?
There you go.
Okay, and so let me quickly read your bio. Salome is a GATE student in 4th grade at Lineweaver Elementary. She loves reading, music, and art. In school, she participates in honors recorder, track, choir, and recently enrolled in student council. On her father's side, Salome is a descendant of the Opata, who are one of the indigenous groups of Sonora, Mexico. And whenever you're ready, honey, go ahead and read the land acknowledgement.
On behalf of the governing board of the Tucson Unified School District, I, Salome Shaw Robles, acknowledge that the schools, buildings, and faculties of Tucson Unified School District reside on the ancestral homeland of the Tohono O'odham Nation and the federally recognized tribal land of the Pasquayaqui tribe.
Good job. Thank you.
Thank you so much for joining us. You did a great job. Now we're going to go on to the Pledge of Allegiance. And is it Erlia?
Yes, it is.
Okay, great, Erlia. This is Erlia Maris, 8th grade at Sechrist Middle School. I'm going to read a little bit about you. Erlia is is an 8th grade student at Sechrist. She's currently our student council president and is always trying to find ways to help strengthen our school's culture. Erlia's teachers describe her as an excellent, hardworking, and devoted student who truly cares about making a difference. Erlia has attended Sechrist Middle School for the past 2 years and will promote from 8th grade in May. Erlia plans on attending Tucson High School, where she'll be preparing for her next endeavor at the University of Arizona. Thank you for joining us, Erlia, and you can start the pledge whenever you're ready. We'll all stand up.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, for liberty and justice for all.
Thank you so much, Erlia. We really appreciate you joining us. Have a good night.
Thank you.
Thank you. ¿Hay alguien que necesita los servicios de un intérprete? Aquí tenemos a alguien que te puede asistir. Okay, todavía no. All right. Thank you. Dr. Trujillo, we're on agenda adjustments.
Rahalva, I have one requested agenda adjustment. If we can take care of the call to the audience and return for awards and recognitions, that would be recommended.
Okay, so do you want to flip number 5?
Yes.
And have that go next?
Absolutely, yes.
All right. Any
Thank you.
objections, anyone? Okay. So we'll go ahead and start with the call to the audience, and I'll turn that over to Clerk Luna Rose.
Thank you, President Grijalva. Good evening, everybody. Thank you for joining us. I shall read a short statement, and then I'll start with the call of the audience. Members of the public may speak during the call to the audience portion of the agenda. The governing board president shall be responsible for recognizing speakers and for maintaining proper order by setting such limitations as may be appropriate. Those who want to speak in person or have their comments read may email or call the board office or may complete a request to address the board form at any time before the close of the call of the audience. The speaker must state their full name and topic prior to addressing the board. Speakers are encouraged to be brief with a maximum time of 3 minutes. If there are documents for the board, please give them to the board office staff and they will ensure each board member receives a copy. Those attending the meeting and or speaking before the board shall observe rules of propriety, decorum, and good conduct. Speakers shall also refrain from impertinent or slanderous remarks. And because TUSD serves students from preschool through high school, speakers should be aware there may be children present. At the conclusion of the call of the audience, the governing board president will ask if individual board members wish to respond to those who have addressed the board, wish to ask staff to review a matter, or wish to ask that a matter be put forth on a future agenda. No more than 2 board members may address each topic. And the first speaker this evening is Dolores de Vera.
Governing Board, and Dr. Trujillo. We, the undersigned substitute teachers of TUSD, hereby ask that the TUSD Governing Board and administrators support fair pensions for substitute teachers. By requiring substitute teachers to remain inactive ASRS members until they reach 2020 each and every year, TUSD is routinely accepting the labor of certain substitute teachers without providing retirement compensation. Prior to 2015, if a sub had an established work record, TUSD supported pensions for subs year-round, resulting in a more lucrative pension upon retirement. To us, fair pension support means that when a sub has a record of engaging in work at least 20 hours per week for 20 hours a week for 20 weeks, the sub would be allowed to sign an agreement to engage in 2020 for the next year. Those who signed the agreement would pay into ASRS on every paycheck, and TUSD would match. A sub who was unable to sign such a commitment would only contribute upon reaching 2020, which is required by law. That is what is fair. Those who can make the commitment get the benefit. Those who cannot, don't. Since the restriction of support toward our pensions was never presented to the governing board for transparent discussion and vote, we also believe that fair support for substitute teacher pensions would include allowing willing subs to, with a consistent record of meeting 2020, to claim contributions not withheld for school years that end in 2020, 2021, 2022, and 2023. This is signed by Dolores de Vera, TUSD sub since 2012, Lynette Price, TUSD sub since 2008, Leticia Santiesteban, TUSD employee and sub since 2001, Susan Soto, TUSD sub since 2017. Gail Preston Rivers, TUSD sub since 2018. Besma Tamim, TUSD sub since 2015. Dina De Gonzalez, TUSD sub since 2001. Tony Walters, TUSD sub since 2007. Elena Ruiz, TUSD sub since 2018. Mayu Zarate, TUSD employee and sub since 2006. Stephen Grinwald Smith, TUSD sub 2003 to 2013 and 2015 to present. Kira Lynn Salentis, TUSD sub since 2019. Paul Savage, TUSD employee and sub since 2003. Laura Tolarski Stevens, TUSD sub since 2007. Carla Demore, TUSD certified teacher and sub since 2016. Kenda Formy, TUSD sub since 2018. Christian Calvis, TUSD sub since 2012. Judith Bain, certified teacher, TUSD sub since 2014. Araceli Rivera Cohen, TUSD sub since 2021. Veronica Barajas,
Ms.
TUSD
DeVetta,
sub since
we're
2000.
at time, so can you give the list of names to Ms. Pena and send it us here to the board?
My colleague has signed up to speak. I would like him to finish reading the names. Is that okay?
That's fine. We will allow. Mr. Schuster? Okay, please, sir, step up. Thank you.
Good evening, members of the Governing Board, Dr. Trujillo, Councilor Ross, and staff. Once again, thank you for this opportunity to speak before you. So I'll continue on. There are only a few more names. Veronica Barajas, TUSD sub since 1994. Robert L. Miller, TUSD sub since 2019. Lynn Schofield, TUSD sub. And in solidarity, Jerry Schuster, ASRS retiree, returned to work, TUSD sub since 2001. Barbara Nersazian, ASRS retiree, returned to work, TUSD sub since 2011. Diana Forrester, ASRS retiree, returned to work, TUSD sub from 1993 to 1996. Full-time TUSD teacher, 1996 to 2011, and a TUSD sub since 2011. And Marla S. Hensley, ASRS retiree, returned to work, TUSD teacher since 1983 and a sub. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Okay, next we have Brianna Chilius.
Good evening, Superintendent Dr. Trujillo and members of the board. So I come before you as a former district employee. And as a former district employee, I want to express heightened concern about an issue I recently came across in my line of work as a school librarian, or excuse me, a public librarian. So in the last governing board meeting, I was excited to share the news about the Right to Read Act, and if signed into law by President Biden, it will reaffirm the First Amendment rights to be applied in school libraries in response to the alarming book trends of book bans and challenges. Not so much in Arizona, but still, it'll protect the staff responsible for providing diverse materials. The act will also ensure that the school libraries across the district will, on a national level, be fully staffed with state-certified school librarians, assistants, and will protect the other educators in carrying out the duty to protect students' right to read, in addition to providing equitable access to those materials. I want to reverberate that according to reports, providing access to a school library results in 73% higher literacy rates for all students, and even more powerful impact for low-income, historically marginalized and disabled students, specifically that disproportionately affects students of colors the most. So speaking of library materials, I do understand that section IJL will be discussed later on in tonight's meeting. I want to share with you something I recently came across from a visit at a school in my line of work as a public librarian who fervently works alongside TUSD school community members in schools as a community partner. What I learned from this visit was extremely concerning. I will not drop the name of the school nor the staff member spearheading this particular project that I will want to highlight in my example. However, the school is within the bounds of TUSD. This is a very passionate library assistant dealing with issues and weeding out materials in their efforts in trying to organize the library and make it readily available for its students. I want to highlight that a very good percentage of library materials weeded out from this particular collection has not been checked out since the late 1970s. That's over 40 years ago. That's over 60% of the collection that has not been updated, which says to me the school has not yet received any monies to update the collection, nor to accurately reflect the richly diverse student population at this school. This was very abysmal and upsetting, to say the least. The main question to the overall board is, why is it that the district is not investing enough money into the school library collections that can accurately reflect the times, the interests, the needs, as well as the nuances of the world that we're living in? Why isn't there enough efforts being done to remedy this deficiency that's existing in the district? Just why? Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, next we have Ishta Robles.
Hello, my name is. Hello, my name is Ishta Robles, and I go to Alice Vale Middle School. A part of my school dress code is no spaghetti strap shirts because it shows our shoulders, and that's considered inappropriate. But we can wear a 2-finger tank top, but that still shows our shoulders, and that's not inappropriate. And I don't see how this is fair. And kids do it either way, so they might as well not get in trouble when they do. Also, a little bit about crop tops. Of course, I don't think that they should be allowed to be super short, but lately that's mostly what they sell at the stores when you go shopping. And like I said earlier, kids do it either way, so why should they get in trouble when they do? So maybe you could allow it, but not to go past the belly button. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, next we have Lillian Fox.
President Grijalva, board members of the board, Superintendent Trujillo, and Attorney Ross. I didn't know what Bree Chilius was going to talk about tonight. I'm thrilled to death that she was here. I'm going to talk about priorities and actually ethics too. And item 8.4, the superintendent is asking the board to approve spending $21,500 for 5 board members and himself to go spend 4 days in Orlando, a resort town, in April. Now, when you look at our libraries, we have 31 school libraries that this year got $0 for books. That may have been one of the schools Bree talked about. We have 25 other schools who got $40 for books. $40 for books, media, and periodicals, everything. So this is disgraceful. 56 schools got less, $40 or less, and yet you are being asked to approve spending $300 a night for a hotel in Orlando for 4 nights, and $280 a day per diem, and you're not funding the libraries. What the heck are you up to? And for the superintendent to ask for money for the district to pay for him to go to Orlando is disgusting. He makes something like $260,000 a year. He can afford to pay to go to Orlando if that is for his benefit. He also is getting $1,000 a year to pay for books for him. Why in the world are we giving him $1,000 a year, somebody who's making over $200,000 a year, to buy books? He can buy his own professional books. Not giving him $1,000 every year might allow us to fund a couple of our libraries, but we're not doing it. I would ask you not to approve and not to go to Orlando. It's disgraceful not to fund the libraries. You heard what Bree had to say. I didn't know about that. We're also funding books for food services, for the finance department, for engineering, for the law office, but we're not funding books for the school. This does not sound like an educational institution at all. The kids should be the highest priority. Isn't that what you guys ran on? It's like if you go to Orlando and spend $3,582 a night or for your trip to Orlando, that's disgraceful. You need to take care of the kids first before you go to a resort town for any conference, no matter how nice it is. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, next speaker is Bets Putnam Hidalgo.
Dear TUSD board members, perhaps you all read the letter to the editor in the recent Star that spoke about TUSD's chronic tardiness in hiring teachers, which contributes to its chronic teacher shortage. The letter ended with the question, "Aren't you embarrassed?" I laughed when I read it because I too have been wondering if the board is embarrassed, but about a different issue. In a meeting some time ago, I heard a board member note that the district had, once again, begun to make changes to the DAPE program without board authorization. While the board's employee, the superintendent, tried to evade questions, he ultimately had to say, "Duly noted," after the board member stated the truth about the district's actions repeatedly. Then, last meeting, the board voted once again on changes that had already been made to the program. In other words, more changes were made without prior authorization. So my question is the same. Aren't you embarrassed? Aren't you embarrassed that your employee repeatedly disregards your role and just moves ahead with his own priorities regarding some of TUSD's most vulnerable students and the teachers who teach them? Weren't you embarrassed when the court noted that the district's changes to the DAPE program were to be reversed? Aren't you embarrassed by how board inaction has caused experienced teachers to either leave the program or leave the district? And aren't you embarrassed overall that you're repeatedly made to look like simply placeholders instead of a board that makes its own decisions? Finally, aren't you embarrassed that most of you ran on protecting or advocating for the rights of marginalized students, and instead you appear completely uninterested in what happens to those very students? Candidates, if you are watching and if you win, please do not allow this habitual capture to continue. In an age where our democracy itself is on the line, do not give away voters' power. Because whether you are paid or not, you are supposed to represent the community of stakeholders. The future of the DAPE program should be of interest to every single board member, as should the future of accountability for the leadership of TUSD. Thank you.
Thank you. And we have a letter to be read from Guadalupe Hedinger.
My name is Guadalupe Henninger. I want to talk about safety and health. Time and time again, we vent our anger to our superintendent and board members. We need to realize that the decisions made at the state level, made by the legislation and the governor, have huge impact. In order to keep our students safe and healthy, treating the symptoms is good, but by addressing the root cause helps to have huge results from 2002 to 2008. We had a Democratic governor who invested heavily in the most vulnerable in our society, children and senior citizens, fully funding education, healthcare, childcare, nutrition, and everything that is good for the people. After that, for more than 10 years till now, we had a GOP lead legislation and GOP governor who have focused mainly on cutting taxes that mainly benefit the special interest groups like Koch Enterprise and others while cutting funding and education. K-12 community colleges, states, universities, healthcare, childcare, and things people need for their well-being. In 2010, they applied for raise to the top money, which required that they adopted Common Core. The implementation was botched, underfunded, short-sighted, not materials for the teachers to teach. The students, it derailed the upward trajectory of our students, even if most students were failing. We had the Ames, it was ranked among the best in the country. The Ames was the only true measure of how our students were doing, but the GOP legislation got rid of it in 2015. Since 2010, I had been speaking up for mere diverse, distinct, dynamic standards and curriculum, but nothing has changed on this midterm elections. We have an opportunity to change that. Vote blue. This midterm election, we have an opportunity to keep moving forward to elect people of good character, like wisdom, honesty, compassion, integrity, who are going to protect our constitutional rights. Because when we ignore the lies, we damage what is true and right. In 2018, we voted to restore the Constitution. In 2020, we voted to restore the integrity of our government. And in 2022, we need to vote for our constitutional rights. Sincerely, Guadalupe Henninger.
Thank you. And that concludes Call to the Audience this evening. Ms. Grijalva.
Okay, board members, this is an opportunity for us to respond to a criticism, ask staff to review a matter, and ask that a matter be put on a future agenda. I would like to ask that we look into the Aliceville dress code and respond to Ms. Robles's comment. And thank you so much for being here. It's really great to see students come to Call to the Audience. Dr. Trujillo.
President Grijalva, members of the board, members of the public, in response to some of the concerns we've heard about the purchase of library books, I invite the public to note our public attachment, the expenditure report, object code 6643, instructional aids. The district spends a total of $6.3 million, $6,375,000 on instructional aids, which are defined by the Auditor General as textbooks, supplementary readers, books, and instructional software. I think a fair and transparent inquiry is to break down that $6.3 million figure and determine how many books, how many supplementary materials make their way into the libraries and make their way into classrooms. We purchase books through a number of funding sources. We purchase them primarily through Title I. I know through our DSEG budget, multicultural department, they're responsible for purchasing a lot of our culturally relevant titles and readers that also make their way to classrooms and libraries throughout the district. I do think that that's a fair inquiry, and I think we can put that report together for the public and for this board.
Thank you, Dr. Trujillo. Any others? Okay, Ms. Shaw.
Thank you, and thank you for everyone who spoke tonight. First, I would like to say in response to Ms. De Vera's letter that I do support pensions for subs, and once again, I would like to place on a future agenda a presentation to the board about how we can get subs into the retirement system. Next, I would like to thank Ms. Chilius for once again advocating for school libraries, and I appreciate you, Ms. Chilius, for being here and speaking, and I think it also speaks to what kind of board member you'll be if elected. Ms. Robles, thank you for sharing that information about Alice Vale. I have heard different things in our middle schools. Each school kind of has their own dress code, and I think some of it is rather antiquated that we can't show our shoulders at this point. Next, thank you, Ms. Fox, for pointing out the ethical issues of, board members going on trips. And same to Ms. Putnam Hidalgo. I am embarrassed about a lot of the things that our district does, and I think that this board should really do more for our students and our staff. And that's all. Thank you.
Okay, thanks. Anyone else? All right, we're going to go ahead and move on. And we're going to go back on the agenda to awards and recognition. And I see a lot of ambassadors from Holiday in the audience, so I'm excited to hear why you're here. Dr. Trujillo.
President Grijalva, members of the governing board, members of the public, and those viewing us online. The best part of any board meeting is, of course, celebrating the excellence and the exceptionality of our students and our staff. And tonight we start with 66 University High School Penguin juniors and seniors. They were awarded recognition through the College Board's National Recognition Program. These students are identified as National Hispanic, African American, and or Indigenous scholars because of their academic achievements in school and their outstanding performance on the PSAT, NMSQT, and other AP exams. These recognitions help students to stand out in the admissions process and can lead to significant scholarship opportunities as well as automatic admissions to honors colleges. We, once again, are extremely proud of all of our University High Penguins. Let's give them a round of applause. Recently, one of the most iconic performance groups in the district, the Tucson High, Los Tuzonenses, celebrated 50 years of celebrating culture and diversity and the beauty of folklorico dance here in the Tucson Unified School District. We are proud to share this 50th anniversary and their designation as the oldest ballet folklorico group in Arizona. These students embrace their Hispanic heritage through dance and storytelling. This amazing group showcases their dedication and talent at multiple events, including the International Mariachi Conference. Thank you to Director Bruno Loya for leading the over 200-member group. We look forward to seeing you at a future event soon. That's coming directly from Director Loya. And also, as well, I want to invite everybody to check them out if you have not seen them perform. Recently, they were highlighted in the Arizona Daily Star, so check that article out as well online. Congratulations, Tucsonenses, and thank you for being such wonderful ambassadors of TUSD. Next up, yes, give them a round of applause. Next up, we would like to take an opportunity to recognize a Pueblo High School educator for being named a Legendary Teacher of the Year. Mr. Cristobal Santa Cruz from Pueblo was selected as the 2022 Tucson Unified School District Legendary Teacher. He was recognized as part of the Pima County Legendary Teacher Day recognition ceremony on Tuesday, October 4th. He received a $200 award along with additional gifts from the Educational Enrichment Foundation. Below is the wording of the nomination submitted by Mr. Oscar Polanco. A man is committed to his students as his father was. Cristobal takes every history lesson and makes it an experience with personal stories, personal interpretations for the students to better understand what's going on, pictures and personal anecdotes to carry in life. Mr. Santa Cruz is a legend amongst kids that have met him, and it should be noted that the first line, a man is committed to his students as his father was an ode to Cristobal's legendary father, Coach Curly Santa Cruz, who proudly served the Pueblo community as one of its legendary football coaches. So congratulations, Mr. Santa Cruz, for this tremendous honor. The most meaningful honor that our teachers receive are those coming from their students. And Mr. Santa Cruz was nominated by this young man who he has had a tremendous impact on. So let's give him a round of applause. And our next recognition is from one of our outstanding administrators in her first year of service serving the Sabino community. Teresa Durazo has been named as one of the THCC's 40 Under 40 Award winners. Congratulations. The Tucson Hispanic Chamber of Commerce, they facilitate the 40 Under 40 Award campaign to recognize amazing Latino, Latina leaders that are focused on leadership as well as on community involvement and the contributions made to moving our community forward. Thank you for all that you do for our community and for the learning community out at Sabino High School. Teresa Durazo currently serves as the assistant principal for curriculum and instruction. Let's give her a round of applause as well. And our next recognition, we want to recognize one of our outstanding Raytheon Leaders in Education Award winners, Molly Grove. Congratulations, from Vail Middle School. She has been selected as one of the Raytheon Leaders in Education Award winners. This award is designed to recognize the contributions of Pima County teachers. The program honors exceptionally skilled and dedicated teachers in grades pre-K all the way through 12th grade in all content areas. These teachers have gained the respect and admiration of students, parents, and colleagues who inspire students of all backgrounds and abilities to learn. They distinguish themselves as leaders and play an active and useful role in their communities and in their schools. Congratulations, Miss Grove. Let's give her a round of applause. And longtime supporter of the Tucson Unified School District, and not just our district, but young people in our community, the Tucson area Boys and Girls Clubs of Tucson. I want to thank them and recognize them for their Trees for Tucson campaign. On Saturday, September 17th, Doolin Middle School had a hockey rink community landscape event to build beautiful gardens outside of the school. These gardens will be used by the school as a teaching area for students where they can plant and harvest delicious foods. Thank you to the Boys and Girls Club of Tucson and Trees for Tucson for helping build the Doolin Middle School gardens and creating this amazingly beautiful green great space for our students and our young people. How about a round of applause for the Doolin community? Thank you to Starbucks and the Black Partner Network for choosing Tully Magnet School and supporting our students in the all-in event Back to School Drive. The event was held on Saturday, September 17th. 85 volunteers that consisted of parents, students, Starbucks employees, and TUSD staff showed up to volunteer. The school had garden donations, including gloves, potting soil, school supplies dropped off at many Starbucks locations around town. Starbucks donated $2,500 worth of items, topsoil, mulch, garden tools, and plants. Starbucks is also giving a monetary donation for every Starbucks volunteer who came to help, and that will go right back into the garden education program. Just another example of how our TUSD schools bring the community together. So thank you very, very much, Starbucks and all of the amazing volunteers that turned out to support the Tully community. This week, we had our classified job fair. Congratulations, Human Resources team and all of our school and departmental representatives. They were out in force at Howenstein on October 19th. During the event, we had over 24 schools and departments attend, interviewing 127 candidates for various positions throughout the district, from monitors to custodians to bus drivers to all kinds of opportunities that we have for serving our students and our communities. 39 job offers were extended at the conclusion of the job fair. So I want to thank everybody who supported this wonderful event, and we look forward to welcoming in these new employees as soon as possible. And we end this recognition on a sad note, as two longtime beloved TUSD employees, one present, one past, have passed on. And we take this opportunity to honor their legacy, their contributions, their passion, and their service to the district. The first, the passing of our teammate, Mr. Bob Kramer. He joined the Tucson Unified School District in 2006, and he worked for the district as an educational technology integration specialist on the technology services team until his passing. During that time, he displayed an unwavering passion to share his knowledge with everybody at the Tucson Unified School District. He displayed an exceptional degree of expertise for a variety of technologies and trained administrators, teachers, and staff to increase their proficiency and technology. Bob always used his educational and professional background in serving our district and our community. We were honored to have him leave his legacy here in our district, always willing to help and share his knowledge and passion for technology with our students and staff each day. We will miss Bob dearly, and we offer our condolences to the Kramer family. Our next in memoriam and observance is for a TUSD legend. Mr. Dan Bailey, one of the most legendary leaders to ever serve in the Tucson Unified community, recently passed away. Dan was TUSD through and through. TUSD was not only in his spirit, in his commitment, his dedication, it was in his blood. He graduated himself from Palo Verde High School and went on to the University of Arizona, where he received his bachelor and master in education degrees. And he taught for 26 years, from 1973 to 1997. And those of us who knew Dan know very well that he only ever really wanted to be a teacher. His calling became administration. And when he became a counselor and an assistant principal at Cholla High School from 1997 to 1994, he discovered new ways to serve kids and community. Dan continued his administrative career as the principal at Catalina High School, where he touched the lives of hundreds of students, and not just students that would graduate and move on to other things, but students who would turn around and become employees and tell stories about how Dan touched their lives when they were students at Catalina High School. Namely, one of my team members in the office, Mr. Nicholas Roman, who speaks of Dan very fondly when he was a student at Catalina High School. Our own regional assistant superintendent, Mr. Richard Sanchez, speaks very fondly of Dan, working for Dan as one of our employees there at Catalina High School prior to becoming an administrator. It was in 2019 that I came into contact with Dan and became intimately inspired and aware of his passion for TUSD, for serving kids, community, and employees. He served as our first ever director for student relations until his final retirement in 2021. And during that time, I was never ceased to be amazed by Dan's boundless energy and his passion for advocating for keeping kids in school. During his time as a student relations director, if there was a way that Dan could find an alternative to suspension, he was going to do it. If there was a way where he could find a way to keep a kid out of executive session and being considered for a long-term suspension or expulsion, he would do it. We are honored that Dan shared his commitment to young people and education in our district. He always had a kind word to share about each and every single student, employee, and community member that he came into contact with and worked with each day. We will miss Dan dearly, and we recognize Dan tonight in a moment of silence. And though we highlight his service here in TUSD, let's also remember that he served with pride the students, the community, and the families of the Pomerene School District from 2007 to 2013, who also have kind stories about Dan's passion and legacy to the students and the families of that district. And with that, we extend our deepest condolences in this time of sadness to the Bailey family. And we take a moment to observe, through a moment of silence, the passing of Mr. Robert Kramer and Mr. Dan Bailey. President Grijalva, members of the governing board, that concludes awards and recognitions.
Okay, thank you. We're on board member activity reports. Board members? Whoever would like. Dr. Ravi, go ahead.
Thank you, President Grijalva. So it's been a really fun month, thanks to fall break, and welcome back everyone from fall break. I hope you had a great time and some good R&R. I had two things to report. One of them, since the last meeting, I was able to enjoy some time with my family at Skate Country to support the PTA at my oldest daughter's school, elementary school. And I say that just to remind everyone out there, a lot of your PTAs, PTOs are having events coming up, and make sure you support your local PTO as much as you can with events and other things going on, or just your end-of-year donations. The PTOs can be really the lifeblood to bring special programs and services and other options for our schools. So support your PTOs as much as you can. And I also had a chance to visit our Innovation Tech Academy earlier, I think last week. And that was a really great opportunity to see firsthand the collaboration between TUSD and our JTED partners, see the Innovation Academy in the flesh, and see some of the great programming being offered there. So I really appreciated the opportunity to see firsthand how we are preparing our students for the jobs of tomorrow.
Thank you. Ms. Shaw?
Thank you. First, I visited Flowers and Bullets with my daughter, and Flowers and Bullets, for those who don't know, is a community group who leases one of our closed down schools to do food production and other types of community work. And yeah, they're doing fabulous things out there. We also went to the Insect Festival at the U of A, which my daughter's teacher told the class about, and learned a whole lot about bugs. I also spoke with an employee and a parent on two separate occasions over the phone about some grievances that they're having with the district. And I just want to remind the public that if they're having issues with anything and it's not being handled through the appropriate channels, to please reach out to me by email or phone if you find my number, and I'll do what I can to address that. Thank you. Finally, also, I went over to school safety headquarters and spoke with some other staff about the equipment they use, you know, how some of the equipment, you know, gives them back issues and all kinds of things like that. And just like learned a little bit more about all of that they do and what they need to be prepared for the work that they do. and not too long after, there was a school safety forum, one for staff and one for parents and students. I attended both. And I know a lot of members of the public and staff asked questions. I know that all of the questions weren't addressed, and I hope that we can schedule an in-person school safety forum to get all of the questions answered and more. And that's it. Thank you.
Thank you. Ms. Luna Rose?
Thank you, President Grijalva. Okay, so just two quick events I'd like to mention. I was invited to read to Lawrence 3-8 for Dia de los Muertos during the Hispanic Heritage Month with the Mexican American Student Services Department. And I got to go to Ms. Pizarro's class, and we read a book about the holiday, and then I brought some goodies, and we made masks, calavera masks, and we had a lot of fun. Mrs. Stanbrook, the principal, even jumped in for a moment, but I had a really, really good time, and they promised they were going to invite me back, so I'm hoping Lawrence 3-8 is listening, because I will come back. And lastly, I attended Queer for Good last Thursday for the LGBTQ plus Alliance Fund with the Community Foundation of Southern Arizona. And they recognized the school district and our work and our support for our LGBTQ plus students, faculty, and staff, and our community. So I was happy to be a part of that.
Mm-hmm.
Thank you.
Thank you. I also attended that same event, Queer for Good. A lot of my other job title and TUSD stuff tend to float over a lot. And so one of the things I did want to highlight is Old Tucson had sort of a dress rehearsal for Nightfall, and they asked the District 5 office to give out 450 tickets to students, and the vast majority were TUSD students, because those are the ones that are in District 5. So it sort of worked out that 450 students, high school students, were able to attend for free at Old Tucson. So that was really great, and I just want to thank all of the teachers and counselors that helped to get students there to that event. I plan on attending the marching band exhibition tomorrow. It'll be at Pueblo High School, so if you can go by, go by. And Lapin Foundation is having an open house, and that's a really strong partner with Wakefield Middle School, so I'll be attending that as well. And then I'll be speaking at the TUSD Fall Magnet Symposium on Thursday, and going to visit Lawrence on Friday. So it should be a pretty busy week. All right, so Dr. Trujillo, can we make some adjustments to the agenda so we can honor the time of our lovely holiday students and parents who brought them?
Yes, let's absolutely do that. We have a lot of parents and students here, and so they are part of the magnet update presentation. So if the board would entertain moving up item, I believe it was 9.5?
Let's look.
So we can address that as the first item. of the
Magnet
night.
Department update?
Yes.
Okay. Any objection, board members? Okay, we'll move right to that. Dr. Trujillo.
Yes. Thank you, President Grijalva, members of the governing board. We would like to invite our magnet leadership team. This is Mr. Cameron Taravati and our Assistant Superintendent for EDI, Kanasha Brown, to take us through tonight's magnet update. We are proudly one of the premier destinations for magnet schools in all of Arizona, and we've got some big, bright, shining stars of magnet schools that we're going to be highlighting tonight that have been one more time. They have been highlighted as being destination magnet schools. So we want to turn it over to our team here, and I understand we've got some recognitions. All right. I believe Mr. Taravati, welcome. Is this the first time you are presenting for us? So it's good to see you behind the podium.
It's good to see you as well. Dr. Trujillo, board president, how is everyone?
Good. Nice to see you.
All right. So I'm here tonight to talk about Magnet. Let's start with the purpose of Magnet. The purpose for Magnet Schools from a 10,000-foot lens is to provide a high-quality learning experience for students, to be part of TUSD's solution for equity. At the granular level, the purpose for Magnet Education is to tailor learning with a thematic instructional focus that ensures increased academic outcomes in an integrated classroom setting. To help prioritize goals for the Magnet Department, a Magnet Oversight Committee was established in March of 2022. The committee is comprised of teachers, Magnet coordinators, program managers, principals, and executive leadership. To date, the committee has met 8 times to help craft a vision around creating high-quality Magnet schools. The committee has taken action to help inform the continuous improvement cycle that is specific to each Magnet, as well as to develop processes and policies that will help TUSD become one of the nation's leaders in Magnet education. To create intention behind its efforts, the Magnet Department has written, edited, revised, and finalized a department-specific strategic plan. There are 6 goals outlined in the strategic plan as noted on this slide. Those are, number 1, to increase the number of high-quality Magnet schools in TUSD. We define those as schools that have their Magnet Schools of America certification and carry a label of A or B as identified by the ADE A through F accountability system. Goal number 2, to decrease academic disparities between Anglo students and students of color. Goal number 3, to reduce racial isolation by focusing Magnet media and marketing efforts on school integration. Goal number 4, like all schools in TUSD, is to increase enrollment. Goal number 5, to increase feelings of inclusivity on each Magnet campus, regardless of race, ethnicity, socioeconomic status, and identity. And finally, goal 6 is to increase the number of college and career-ready students to ensure success post-graduation. Now, behind each one of these goals are strategies, actionable steps, and a timeline so that we can complete this work. Now, this is one of the most important slides, creating impact. This is where we as a department continue to ask about our purpose, about evidence that indicates we are creating impact, where we reflect on practice. That said, our aim is to be a support, an ally, a thought partner to each one of our 12 Magnet schools. It's to listen, to react, and to help meet individual schools where they are at to help realize that Magnet Department strategic plan. As you can see on this slide, to date, in Q1, we have executed 64 site visits among 12 Magnet schools. As a department, we have provided a variety of differentiated professional development that A, increases instructional effectiveness, B, ensures strong assessment and intervention systems, as well as making sure that we have dedication and fidelity to the Magnet thematic experience, which makes Magnet schools unique. This training and professional development, of course, is evidence-based and is aligned with individual site needs. Some of these trainings that you can see listed are job-embedded instructional coaching, training on site Magnet templates, instructional leadership development, instructional systems training, and of course, each component listed here on this slide is everything that we have completed to date or will complete by the end of the first semester. But for the Magnet Department, it's not about the intensity of this work. It's about the consistency, showing up to sites day in and day out to do this work, to spiral coaching, to spiral professional development, and to spiral training throughout the school year. Also in this slide, something we're very proud of in the magnet department. We're very excited to present this evening the impact and renovations of 3 schools, capital improvements, de Bonillas, Holiday, and Dodge. If you haven't been to some of these schools, you gotta go visit. As a department, we have invested close to $4 million in capital improvements at these sites to address spacing or just building needs. All right, our next steps. As a department, our next steps, of course, are to continue these site visits that are creating impact, holding reflective progress monitoring meetings that allow the magnet department to take a deep data dive with sites to help inform site-based professional development and to assist with systems implementation at the site level. Additionally, we'll continue to focus efforts on professional development that support instructional leadership and site-based needs. This quarter, we will also complete training efforts by focusing efforts on literacy needs and aligning each site magnet plan to the MSA, the Magnet Schools of America Standards for Excellence. Next steps will be based in the continued implementation of this work and, of course, the continued engagement of the Magnet Oversight Committee. Now, slide 6. This is why all these amazing people are here tonight. If we could give them a round of applause. So in the magnet department, we have an internal $100,000 internal grant offered to magnet schools this year. We had 10 applicants, and these applicants were amazing. They submitted incredible applications, but we had co-applicants that presented something incredible, something about equity, something about removing barriers and creating access, which is the heart of equity. And so we have 2 schools here tonight that we'll award this $100,000 grant to, and that's Holiday Fine Arts Magnet, if we could give them a round of applause. And Carrillo K5. Their application presented a plan to help connect families to schools in a way that removed barriers and created access. We're super proud of them, and if we could maybe all come up, if we could get a picture with you all, that would be amazing. And that concludes our presentation this evening on Magnet. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Thank you very much.
Wait, how do you press it?
It's right there.
Press it on.
It's that one.
Have a nice day.
Thank you.
Everybody, please go home now.
Thank you.
Thank you. Mommy, please come up here.
Thank you, everybody.
Thank you. Thank you so much. All right. Do you want to take a quick break or? Yeah, go ahead. We're going to take a quick 2-minute break and then we'll start again. Please. Ms. Shaw? Rest. All right, we're going to go ahead and get started then. I think she can hear me, right? Okay. Now we are on consent agenda. Dr. Trujillo.
President Grijalva, members of the governing board, I would like to just highlight consent agenda item 6.3. You have already approved a high school and middle school participation in the fine and performance non-athletic activities for 22-23, but every time we add events, we do bring it back, and we are proudly adding the International Mariachi Conference as one of the board-approved events for April 24 through 28th. That's why it's making its way back, so that we can appropriately add that event. With that, I would like to present for your consideration for approval consent agenda items 6.2 through 6.6 as presented on this consent agenda.
Thank you for bringing that back. I'll go ahead and move the item.
I'll second.
I have a motion and a second for the consent agenda. Any discussion? All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Item passes unanimously 4-0. Now we're on item 7. And if we can all vote online, please. Item 7 is DES Workforce Grant Additional Spending Plans. Dr. Trujillo.
Yes, President Grijalva, members of the board, and I do believe we've got Mrs. Kiewit standing by for any particular questions. But we are seeking to utilize some of the dollars from the recently received DES Child Care Workforce Stabilization Grant. I think you remember we were here in September with a $6.6 million request for the governing board to accept that grant. And we said we would come back with some additional expenditure requests. So Mrs. Kiewit is returning to ask to use a portion of those dollars to support our employees that are on the preschool side of the house, because our original ask was for those employees working in the community schools before and after school programs, and maybe some additional opportunities that's going to create for some of our employees that are currently paying tuition for preschool. Mrs. Kiewit?
Oh, you turn it on.
Testing, testing. Okay. Good evening, Board President Grijalva, distinguished board members, Dr. Trujillo, and legal counsel. Just as Dr. Trujillo described, we have over $6.6 million in grant funding, the workforce grant that needs to be spent. And so we wanted to request that about $340,000 be used to cover payroll and benefits for the tuition pre-K programs that we currently have. This will help us rebuild and make some improvements to our classrooms and cover those expenses, and we don't have to worry about a deficit. So that's the main ask. And then in addition to that, we'd like to offer free pre-K programming in those programs as a benefit for just TUSD staff to continue to incentivize working for our district. And that's pretty much it. So just ready for any questions you might have.
Board members, any questions? Go ahead, Dr. Ravi.
Thank you, President Grijalva, and thank you for bringing these recommendations over. We were really happy to hear about this funding that we have. And so for the second part of the request, in terms of making this a benefit for TUSD employees to have the option of free tuition for our internal preschool programs, how many employees are currently utilizing the preschool? And this would be just for this school year, or for this school year and next school year? Or
Great questions. This is just for this school year, and we probably have about 25 to 50 TUSD families and all of our programs. I would have to look and see how many specifically in those programs, but we prioritize placement for TUSD staff. So we have quite a few, to be honest. I can get you those numbers, though.
Do we have an estimated cost then
Of
for that ask?
Well, so what we we charge our families just for tuition, to cover payroll and benefits. So we don't look to make a profit. And so it's $340 for the whole thing. So I don't have those numbers. I should have had them for you. I could estimate, but I would rather give you more solid numbers.
Dr. Trujillo.
Yes, President Grijalva, board members. So specifically and for clarity, Mrs. Kiva, $340,100, that's going to cover the total payroll, benefits, hourly salaries,
all of it,
compensation for the 15 employees that are working in the 10 preschool tuition classrooms.
Correct.
At 7 sites, which is going to free up the $340,000 that we get in tuition everywhere else to be able to move forward on some of those other expenditures.
Correct.
Is that correct?
That's exactly right.
But it's the $340,000 that you're requesting to be allocated to the payroll and the salary and compensation for the employees, that directly aligns to the grant. That's the permissible expenditure. But the other stuff that we're moving forward on, that's just budget capacity that's freed up with this grant covering compensation for the employees.
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
And with regard to the total number of employees, when you get those numbers, there are, and correct me if I'm wrong, we have employees that qualify for our free inclusive preschool programs, and then we also have employees that up to this point, we incentivize them by guaranteeing them we guarantee them a spot.
Yes.
But what we don't do is cover the tuition.
Correct.
Right? And so with tonight.
This is the
Okay.
grant very much suggests, and they would like for us to be able to give that incentive to our employees.
Okay. But if you got those numbers, it would help to break it down. How many
Absolutely.
employees are taking advantage of the inclusive Title I preschool that's free of cost versus those that are currently paying tuition?
I will definitely email all of you guys that information first thing tomorrow morning.
Thank you. Ms. Shaw.
Thank you. And I just wanted to ask if there's any employees on the wait list to receive free childcare. And I want to point out that I hope that we're reserving those free spots for our lowest paid employees.
So we absolutely have wait lists, and we do have staff that are on wait lists. As we hire and train, we then are able to add more families depending on the program. As far as income of TUSD employees, we don't track or request that information at this time. We do prioritize low-income families in general by if they qualify for DES or a scholarship or something like that, and they bring evidence of their income, they get priority placement as well, or refugee families get priority placement. So we have, different groups that fall under the priority placement. And then from there, how do we pick and choose? It's when you applied. So first come, first serve within that, because it's just, we haven't found a more fair way to do it.
Well, I think a fairer way is just to do it based on need and, equity as far as who can afford to go outside of the district for childcare and who cannot. And I hope we reserve more spots for those who have the greatest need.
Thank you.
Okay, thanks. Any other questions? Go ahead, Dr. Ravi.
So is the plan for the tuition cost coverage to be retroactive to the start of the school year? Is the plan to do it from moving forward after approval? What is the actual plan in terms of the details on that?
It would be retroactive.
To the start of the school year?
Yes, from August to the end of the school year.
Before we vote on this issue, is there a way to get that kind of actual number of how much we're approving tonight before we vote on this issue?
It's the $340,100.
So I want to just repeat for clarity, tonight's ask, there are two. $340,000 covers the total compensation of the 15 employees serving in the 10 classrooms that are fee-based preschool. That covers all of your compensation. That's the only portion of the expenditure that we're allowed to use this grant for, okay? Now, the board has to take a separate action to give the administration authorization to offer preschool free of charge for designated employees. That's only the board can set fees, only the board can cancel fees. So it's actually those two separate actions that we're asking the board to take action on tonight.
So, Dr. Trujillo, since that's not like clearly articulated in the item,
Okay.
so it would be really, I'm fine with going ahead and going with the recommendation, but let me see.
So if I can
if you could, even if you could just bullet them, that would be
Okay.
helpful. Because they're like two sentences all together. So unless there's other questions, I'll go ahead and motion to approve DES workforce grant funding to be used to cover payroll and benefits for community schools. Pre-K program, 7 sites, 10 classroom, 15 employees. I'll say that in the form of a motion.
I will second.
Okay, have a motion, a second. All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Item passes unanimously 4-0. And then the next motion would be to approve the administration's recommendation to waive preschool tuition for tuition-based preschool programs for current TUSD employees. That was okay.
I will second.
I have a motion and a second. All in favor say aye.
I'm not ready to vote on this. I would like the details on how much it's going to cost, and is it coming from M&O, or where is this coming from?
No, this is coming
DES,
from
it's a
right
grant.
here,
This
this
comes from the grant as well.
$340,000, 100.
Well, that includes everything.
Yes, that's the only reason we can afford to do that is because it's covered by the grant. It's not going to cost anybody any extra money, not my department, not the district. It is literally getting paid for by this grant.
Oh, so 340 from the grant is including both those items?
Correct.
Both the funding of positions as well as the tuition?
Yes, sir.
Okay.
Ms.
Yes,
Shaw.
sir.
Thank you. And I would like to wait to vote on that specific part of this until we can see that the employees who will be receiving these benefits are actually in need of them. I don't want to give money or free tuition to like someone who makes $100,000. I know we have a lot of employees with children who need childcare, and I want to make sure that this grant funding is going towards those who need it. So can you flesh that out more before we vote on it?
Ms. Kiewit, it's a DES workforce. Does it require income? It's just totally open.
They would like us almost to disregard income. They want, if we're TUSD, they want us to give as much to the employee, directly to the employee in terms of financial aid as possible in as many different ways as we can think of. So they're not
Okay.
even looking at income. They do not recommend looking at income. Give it to as many TUSD district employees as you can.
Okay, Dr. Trujillo.
Yes, and if it's the will of the board, we will obviously will course correct. The intention of our proposal to cover our employees, we're bringing that forward as a pure retention incentive. If the will of the board is to make it need-based, that's a different proposal. We would have to go back and start looking at it that way. We looked at it as what's another tool in our tool chest in this very devastating labor shortage to just say thank you for working for us. Whether you're a custodian or a teacher or an administrator or a counselor, there is the same risk of departure from the district at all those positions. So the spirit of it was retention. It was not need-based. However, if the board does prefer more of a need-based approach, we can do that as well. We can have that information ready. But the original intention was more just retention and employee appreciation.
I think prioritizing people in our district that maybe are making lower wages, that kind of thing. Do you ask any of that information when people are enrolling their students? So this would be something that we would have to ask for separate.
Yes, so we would have to, it would be about creating a process and protocol and definitely having to collect documentation and paperwork, and we do that right now for a lot of our programs that accept scholarships, and it's very tedious, and most parents and families have difficulty providing all that documentation, and so it actually creates more of a barrier, and I think we'll be able to help less people based on my years of experience collecting that kind of information for people.
Okay, so we have a motion and a second. Do we have, I know that, did you have enough information to move forward, Dr. Ravi? And Ms. Shaw, you would prefer to wait?
I would prefer to wait, and I just have one more question.
Okay.
Ms. Kivit, do you ask the employees what their position is?
Yeah, we collect their ID number and then we look them up to make sure they're current employees.
Okay, because it's, just looking at the position is a pretty clear indicator of where they are financially. And so if we can, I understand there's a lot of paperwork involved, but, simple thing like that, I think would kind of save some time. And so I really want to make sure that we put this money to those who are at most in need, and probably those positions that we most need retention in.
Mm-hmm. No, I appreciate that, and I also think that it may be because they don't know that this is a benefit. We may not have people that are utilizing our preschools, mostly because it's pretty costly to put your children in preschool.
It is.
So if it was a benefit that people knew about, I think that makes sense. So was your idea with this funding, should it go through right now, to address your current students or current families?
Current families and anyone new that we place.
Okay. And is there any estimate on how many families you'd be able to support with this funding?
We could support all of them because payroll and benefits are covered. So that's not going to be an issue whatsoever. It's not going to cost us more or less. This is based on how many slots we have, how many staff we have for the year in those classrooms. So if we gave it to 200 people or 5 people, it does not change this amount.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. I think that there was a motion and a second for the item as presented. I think you hear from, and I agree that we need to figure out if there is a way for us to provide additional supports to employees that are not making as much in our district. I would like to be able to list this as a benefit, and I think that was the intention, right, Dr. Trujillo, to open it up and make sure people know about the benefit and that it would be free.
And I want to make sure we're not talking about two different things. So there's the access question, and that's where Reem and her team, and that means seat in the program. We have an open spot, and we want to make sure that when you're talking about access, being able to get into the preschool, we are prioritizing those low-income families, those low-income community. We are prioritizing the refugee students. We're prioritizing those underprivileged students. We're talking about now cost. So we're talking about the preschool fee-paying community. We're talking about those that are paying a tuition to get into preschool. And within that preschool fee-based community, we're going even smaller, and we're saying only the TUSD employees inside of this larger pool of parents and guardians that pay for tuition, we would like to be able to offer them the free, waive the tuition fee as a thank you for working for TUSD, as an incentive to remain employed. That's what we're doing. So, but if the feeling is going into that smaller pool and then even going smaller and sort of rank ordering them according to position, that wasn't how we brought the item forward. Okay, we would have to come back for that.
I understand. Okay, I'm going to go ahead and ask for a roll call vote for the item as presented.
Ms. Luna Rose?
Yes.
Dr. Ravi?
Yes.
Ms. Shaw?
Abstain.
Ms. Grijalva?
Yes, item passes 3-0 with one abstention from Ms. Shaw. Okay, thank you.
Thank you very
for the
much.
information. All right, now we're on 7.2. Review, approve, and adopt the revised, I actually have a question. We have several employees here, and I want to make sure that I understand what item they're waiting for, so we might be able to move that up on the agenda. No. Is that 9.3? So would you like to do this presentation on the, is there a specific order you want to go in? Or can we move?
The compensation item includes Mr. Hernandez and Mr. McNeely.
Okay. Yeah, if we can do that. So we'll go ahead and do 7.2 and then jump to 9.3 if that's okay with the board? Okay, great. All right, thank you.
Yes, I'd like to welcome Marisela Mesa, our Director for Employee Relations, and we've got the Eli Meet and Confer, the consensus agreement, ready for board consideration.
Thank you. President Grijalva, governing board members, the Eli agreement being presented to you admittedly in October for this school year. There's a recognition that it's later than normal. There was some leadership transition that prompted some delay. Just wanted to make sure everybody was up to date with any changes. And just so the board is aware, when it comes to Eli, we do a lot that isn't necessarily memorialized in the agreements. For example, one of our big charges was the principal mentor program, which we were able to put together in a matter of months with the support of the governing board and Dr. Trujillo. So a lot of work has been done that maybe isn't always represented in the actual agreement, but nonetheless, it was a good negotiation season, and we're asking for approval of the Eli agreement.
Thank you. Board members, questions? I'll go ahead and move the item.
I'll second.
I have a motion and a second by Ms. Luna Rose. Any discussion? All in favor say aye. Aye. Opposed? Item passes unanimously. And so now we're going to move, so we have, let's see. We're going to move to 9.3, school year 22-23 compensation analysis. Dr. Trujillo.
Yes, President Grijalva, members of the governing board. Tonight, we want to turn it over to our Chief Financial Officer, Mr. Ricky Hernandez, our interim executive director for HR, Mr. Chris McNeely, employee relations director, Marisela Mesa, to talk about the various compensation and compression scenarios and possibilities for the board to consider. It's very important to note for those that are in the public and our employees that are watching anxiously, there is no action scheduled tonight. This is an opportunity for the board to consider information in the public space, which will give them an opportunity to give the administration further direction, ask for clarification, and then of course we will come back at a later board meeting for the action item. So with that, I will turn it over to Ms. Mesa.
Thank you, Dr. Trujillo. Jean, we're going to start off with the bus driver PowerPoint first, and then it'll be the compression, and we'll follow with Mr. Hernandez's presentation. Thank you. President Grijalva, governing board members, I'm joined here today with Mr. Hernandez and Mr. McNeely, but also joined today by a number of your bus drivers who are present, and I will say we're grateful that this agenda item is being heard earlier because, as you know, a number of them have to wake up very early to get our students to school. Last year we came before the board, and this is the item specific to bus drivers. Thank you. Perfect. Last year we came before the board, provided comparisons with other districts and said, you know, we believed it would be appropriate and necessary considering comparisons to increase bus driver compensation. What followed is exactly what you expected. Other districts increased their compensation. Other groups did to stay competitive. Is a highly competitive market for transportation in order to retain and attain our bus drivers. So we just provided some comparisons. These are average entry level amounts right now, we are starting at 16. Again, these people have, these districts have been jumping to get in front of us. So now it's our turn to potentially jump in front of them. So this is what is going on in Pima County. These are just some additional comparisons so you are aware. We have Suntran, which we always hear is the big fish in town, and then what other districts are doing within the state. Some of those districts do have overrides and other resources, but we just provided that information to you all for consideration as you're looking at this. This slide here, we wanted to provide to the board after I present and you hear from Mr. McNeely. You're going to hear a cost analysis from Mr. Hernandez, and there's going to be discussion in the two presentations about compression and the dollars and amounts associated with compression. You're also going to hear about potential employee increases that would be district-wide. So this chart is to provide some scenarios depending on what you consider based on the information today. So for example, if there had been a decompression, this would just be a starting of 1841, but it wouldn't take into any consideration additional increases that would be district-wide. Again, these are starting amounts, and they do not account right now for seniority placement. So this would not be the starting salary for individuals that have been here with the district. Our job is to present the information to all of you, what is going on within the market and how we compare to other districts. In an upcoming, one of the upcoming presentations, you're going to hear a little bit more about all employee increases that would be district-wide, and this information is for your consideration, but important as you're making decisions moving forward and as an entire package regarding compensation. So with that, I'm going to ask Mr. McNeely to come forward to talk a little bit more about compression. Oh, and here, you received the slides that had everything regarding bus driver info. Go ahead.
Thank you, Ms. Mesa. I come to bring some information on wage compression analysis. I've not used this before, so please bear with me. Governing Board, President Grijalva, members of the board, you've already committed $6.9 million to our employees' compensation this year, seeing approximately 800 employees move from below a $15 rate up to that 15. Fantastic work. That did create an impact. The increase to 15 adjusted all salary scheduled cells that were below 15 to a $15 amount. Our top 3 scheduled grades currently have cells at $15 an hour. This leads to, in some circumstances, a lead making the same amount of money as the employees that work for them. I'll present today 3 examples of compression alleviation for your review to move forward. Moving from 13 to 15 at entry, with 3 different strategies to reinstate the 5% gap between the cells. The decompression scenarios are listed on the screen for you. The top box is currently where we sit. Our D, E, and F grades are as they are. So $15 up to step 11 on D, and then you can see that works its way down. That's the compression that we talk about. Scenario 1 would be a 3-year plan to address compression and to reinstate that space between the grades. About 1.66% per year change. Scenario number 2, that the compression at 2.5%, a 2-year plan, would be that 2.5% between the top 3 grades. And then a decompression at 5%, which would be a 1-year ask, would put that 5% right back in. Just a a quick look at what the salary schedule would look like in each of those areas for the first step on each grade. When Renee presented in March of this year about compression, she talked about some different employees, and I wanted to bring those employee situations back so you can see how compression affects those people in those positions. So you've seen these employees before, and I won't read out the different cells, but there are scenarios where the 3-year schedule, the 2-year schedule, and the 1-year schedule can be decompressed at those rates for each of these different employees. All right. Mr. Hernandez.
Do you want us to ask questions now or wait until the end?
I can take questions now.
Okay.
Some of them might be addressed in Mr. Hernandez's.
Let's go ahead and wait for the whole presentation, and then if you all can, board members, take notes on any questions, we can always come back. Thank you.
Thank you.
All right. Good evening again, board members. This is a analysis from a financial perspective of the plans that both Ms. Mesa and Mr. McNeely presented to you just a bit ago. So these are the prior cost scenarios that Renee Weatherless presented to you back in March that you approved. This was meant to allow the district to move its salary for classified staff to meet the Tucson Minimum Wage Act that had just passed in the fall of 2021. So the idea was to try to move ahead with meeting the $15 an hour goal that the act presented to all employers across the city of Tucson over the course of the next 3 fiscal years. It provided allocations for both current compression for those individuals at that time based on increasing the minimum wage, what the cost of the minimum would be, and any additional compensation over the course of those 3 years. Between this fiscal year and next fiscal year, at that point, the plan was a $2 million increase, and then in the following 2 fiscal years was a $1 million increase. So what does it look like when we actually implement the wage and decompression scenarios that Mr. McNeely put out? So for classified staff, and we've extracted bus drivers from the rest of the classified staff, the cost to decompress everybody as a result of the increase to the $15 an hour minimum wage in July would be up over $12 million. So we would need to appropriate $12 million to the classified staff schedule, excluding the bus drivers, in order to keep that 5% separation between grades. The increase is another $1.8 million to provide an actual increase to the salary schedule. So we're looking at a total of nearly $15 million for classified staff only. For bus drivers, just to make sure that we focus on what the governing board has focused in the past, which are these market adjusted critical positions across the district, such as bus drivers, the cost to do the same pieces would be $616,000. So we're looking at $15 million, almost $15.5 million to actually decompress the schedule, provide an increase to all classified staff together. For non-certified, or classified staff, so these include central administrators, instructional leaders like principals and assistant principals, and other professional non-teaching positions, their salary schedule is not compressed. So there is no allocation nor request to actually decompress the schedule for those individual groups, but there would be a parity with the increase of 2% that is provided to all the other classifications, the cost being just over $500,000 for this group. For certified staff, as you're well aware, there are 2 classifications of certified staff that we divide, TDRA and TDRB. Again, their salary schedules are not compressed, traditionally compressed like we have for the other classified staff members. So there is no allocation for compression for certified staff in either TDRA or TDRB. There is an increase to their salary, $3.2 million for TDRA, $373,000 for TDRB. The increase is outlined as stated below. $3.5 million for certified staff. So in the course of 1 year, if we implemented this in one fiscal year, we're looking at nearly $19 million in new spending in order to meet the compression requirements and the salary increases to all staff members across the district. Now, a multi-year implementation to kind of mimic what Mr. McNeely presented, if we did this over 2 years, $12.5 million in the first year, about $6.5 million in the second year. A 3-year implementation, which is something we were looking at back in the month of March. You can see 10, 4, and 4. Ultimately, we're still looking at the same amount of money. This all still leads down to the path of $18.9 million, whether you do it in 2 fiscal years or 3 fiscal years. The execution of it, it would be that if we move forward this fiscal year, all increases in compression adjustment would happen in the month of February. They would be retroactive to the 1st of July, so the first of the fiscal year. Eligible employees would need to be active TUSD employees on the last day of the pay period ending January 18th, 2023. So they would have to be here, actively employed, actively drawing a paycheck, the whole 9 yards for that pay period. Any future compression adjustments would happen on the first of the fiscal year if we did this on a multi-year basis. And now we will take your questions.
Okay, board members, questions? Dr. Rafi.
Thank you, President Grijalva. Can we go back to the presentation that Mr. McNeely had taken us through? And I'm not sure this is a question for Mr. McNeely or for Mr. Ricardo, Hernandez, excuse me, Ricky. But on the, let me see what slide. Slide 5. When you have all the decompression scenarios, can you go through exactly the different scenarios and what we're actually doing in each of the scenarios? So what do you mean by 1 year plan and a 5%, or is it 1.66 and a 3 year plan? So every year we're increasing to that stage 4, and can we kind of go through exactly what the scenarios are and what we're looking to get more information about in terms of cost down the road?
Absolutely. Yeah. Can you go one slide back, please? Is this the one?
Yes.
Yeah, perfect. So number 1 is where we are right now. Number 2 would be Ricky's 3-year number. So it would be putting 1.66% between grade D and grade E and grade F, and then F and grade D across the board. Scenario, or number 3, to decompress with a 2-year plan would be to put 2.5% in between grade D and grade E and grade F, and there's between F and G, there's 2.5 and some
I'm sorry, so is this for the first year then?
Correct. Yeah.
Okay, so number 2 is if we do a 3-year plan, that would be the difference between the grades in the first year, and then it would go to the second year in 23, 24, it would go to number 3, and then 24, 25, it would be at number 4.
These
and then
are
number 4 is
these
doing it
are
all at
first
once.
year only. These are examples of the first year salary schedules only for each of the 3 scenarios.
Yeah, your assumption's correct. So
Okay.
we are looking at, this is what it would look like. This is how we would actually put the dollars into the salary schedule in order to achieve a 1, 2, or 3-year implementation of compression. Because the salary increases would all happen in year 1, right? We'd give everybody the salary increase, but compression, because that's the 12, that's the big elephant, right? We'd have to slice that bad boy up into more than 1 year, hopefully. I mean, we could do it in 1 year, but ultimately we're looking for direction from you on whether we want to do this over multiple years, and we've planned that out as such so that you can see what it would look like in reality, kind of down on the ground.
And then the grades are different job classifications. So I'm this job, I'm grade D, I'm this job, I'm grade E, and then the steps are every year you get another step for just seniority or just kind of your experience and everything in the district.
That's correct.
Okay.
Any other questions? Okay, and this is a study item. Ms. Shaw.
Oh, thank you. You know, just looking at the bus driver comparisons, and then the next slide, which shows how much we pay our bus drivers and their years of experience. And it's just sad that, you know, 10 years, from 20 years to 30 years, there's like a $1.85 difference. and I think it's a shame. And I'm not sure if this plan is going to address the needs of our bus drivers.
Okay. I think that, I know that it's going to be, Dr. Trujillo, did you want to weigh in before I move on?
Yes, President Grijalva, members of the governing board. Number one, I just want to take a moment to just let the public know just how difficult this issue is for our governing board members. And we have to remember when they approved and they took action to establish the $15 an hour as the new minimum wage in the district, they brought immediate economic relief to almost 800 employees who were still making between $13.30 and $13.84. Okay, so in doing that, in trying to bring that economic relief, it created this additional compression. We essentially recompressed the salary schedule. There was no really good way to handle the issue. If you would have left the 800 employees continuing to make that low wage in this time of historic inflation, we would not, in my opinion, we would not be looking out for our employees to the best of our ability. So I do applaud and support the board for taking that immediate action. So with that being said, we have a new project, compression, okay? And compression because we do value our veteran employees, and we don't want a situation where somebody who has 10 or 15 years of service is making $15 an hour, and then the person that was newly hired yesterday also makes $15 an hour. That's very important. For us, the best way forward is to look at a multi-year plan, is to look at the 3-year plan. What that's going to allow us to do, it's going to allow us to take the hefty price tag for compression. It's going to allow us to break it up over 3 years so that we're not immediately busting through our carry forward in one single year. We have to take a look at what you'll see in the latter part of the evening. Our 40th day enrollment report is going to note that enrollment is down. And conservatively, we have to plan subsequent fiscal years assuming that we may be a little down or that we may be coming in flat. I think by breaking up the compression commitment over 3 years, it makes it more manageable. It still leaves a chunk of your carry forward balance intact to carry forward into the next fiscal year without running through all of it. Because what the board also has to take into consideration is its ongoing commitments in terms of what you've already invested in the original compression package that was approved in March of 2022. The market wage for those essential positions, that was another $2.2 million commitment made by the governing board in May, and then of course our compensation package that we passed. So that's ultimately going to be our recommendation as the board considers its options. Do you have enough carry forward to do the entire, to just really take care of everything? You do, but that means you're comfortable moving into subsequent fiscal years with zero carry forward, and then at that point you're starting to go backwards.
Board members, any other questions? Okay, this is a study item. I don't believe it's study action. Let me just double check. It's just study. I tend to want to be able to address the compression in a year. I think I know that would be difficult for our district, and so when you bring the item back, I'd really like to be able to make an informed decision on what that budget impact is going to mean. And does that mean that some of the initiatives that individual board members, as a board, we voted on, are we going to have to look at changing some of those things? I mean, I just think that I want to make sure that we have all of the impacts right in front of us. So if we choose to do 1, 2, or 3 year decompression, I want to clearly understand what that impact means. And I want the community to understand it. So, we worked really hard to do several things in our district that I think are being really celebrated. And if we opt to do this, what does that mean? And I think that as long as we have all of that information in front of us, I feel like we can make I appreciate the presentation. We're going to have at least 2 weeks to look over it, and then also get some input from our community members that are very invested in us moving forward. Yeah, any other questions?
I have
Okay,
a comment.
yeah. Board Member Shaw.
Thank you. Just real quick, for those drivers in the audience and other staff listening at home, if something doesn't look right to you on this presentation, or if you want us to address something in a way that maybe we haven't heard in this presentation, please feel free to reach out to me or other board members.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you for the presentation, and thank you to all of you for coming in. All right. Now we are going to go back. Let's see. We are at 8.1, a school year 22-23 safety and security infrastructure expenditure proposal. Dr. Trujillo.
President Grijalva, members of the governing board, tonight we are going to be presenting our recommendations for the first step in addressing some Tier 1 safety and security infrastructure challenges at some of our schools. When I say Tier 1, I mean structural, talking about gating, talking about fencing, talking about windows, and then of course video surveillance systems. We wish that we had more for you, but tonight it's a modest first step to really take care of some immediate needs. With that, I'll turn it over to our Director for School Safety, Mr. Joe Hallams.
Thank you, Dr. Trujillo. She stepped out. President Grijalva, Governing Board, Dr. Trujillo, Legal Counsel Ross. Again, last time I had the opportunity to come speak with you, you agreed to expand our school safety department. I just kind of wanted to give you a quick update before we kind of went on to that, to the item for this evening. Last time you guys all agreed that we would expand by 2 dispatchers, a field lieutenant and 5 day shift officers that would help provide that training and be those safety champions of all of our schools within our district. So far we have hired the 2 dispatchers, and we have the lieutenant who just started this week, and we'll be holding our interviews for the 5 additional officers later this week. So hopefully they'll be in place soon. We'll get them trained up and get them out in the schools so they can provide the services that we need for our students in our community. And also, kind of before I get started, I really wanted to touch on the fact that we understand that school safety is not just about a uniform presence. It's also not about what we're going to be talking about here about infrastructure improvements or hardening a target. It's a multifaceted approach, and it really takes an entire community to ensure the safety of our schools. We're really diligently working on providing additional training to our staff members, and in preparation to do so, seeking out training and partnering with different groups ourselves. Very proud of the fact that we've recently partnered up with the Crisis Prevention International. That was through our ex-ed department, and kind of doing some de-escalation or anti-escalation practices. Also working very closely with Ms. Brown and with Ms. Warmbrand over in our EDI department. Again, trying to identify better ways we can provide de-escalation training or anti-escalation, identifying some of those triggers before they kind of get to those levels. This is the type of service that we want to provide our schools going forward. Tonight, though, I really want to speak about some of our security site assessments. As part of that, as part of our daily duties, especially my emergency managers, of which we have 2, we ask them to go around to our sites and look at our various sites and where we can make improvements to, as the expression is, to harden the target, make sure that people can't get in that we don't want to get in. We have and we'll kind of get into that a little bit. Recently, Dr. Trujillo and I did do the meetings with both the with the parents and with our staff, and in that the subject of the age of our schools was brought up. These schools were not built, to keep people out. They were built as places to be warm and welcoming, inviting people in. Unfortunately, times have changed, and we have to kind of reevaluate that. So in these schools that we'll be looking at that we feel need to be moved upon rather quickly, we did an analysis to determine when they were built, and found that the average age of these schools was about 70 years old, and the average year built was 1951. Clearly, they were not built with the idea of the unfortunate realities that we have to face today. So I asked my emergency managers, let's evaluate all of our schools. That's an ongoing basis, but really with the goal of keeping unwelcome and unwanted individuals out. We want to know who is on our campuses at all time. And if it's wide open for people to have easy access, that's not always the case. I think we've made great strides in making sure that everybody kind of comes in and checks in at the front office and signs in, provides an ID, and we know who they are and what their intentions are while we're there. But if the rest of our grounds aren't secure, that's not necessarily as effective. So we also looked at schools we knew with critical infrastructures. Also, unfortunately, we've had past events at some of these schools that we'll be looking at today. Schools that lack key safety and security devices, specifically electronic key access as opposed to hard keys, or just exposed windows and doors that needed to be addressed. We also looked at our local crime rates around some of these schools. In evaluating the local crime rate, unfortunately, the entirety of city of Tucson has seen an increase in crime. So it didn't provide as much light and identify some of the specific schools that we had hoped. But of these 13 schools that we decided that needed the most critical infrastructure improvements, these are their locations once we identified them. And we understand that all of our sites need improvements. I'm sure might be principals watching this going, hey, what about my school? I get it. This is kind of that first step, as we talked about. The facilities department and my department have been working closely to really try to work in parallel lines and establishing our strategic plans going forward to ensure that we can incorporate not only infrastructure improvements, but technologies to improve the safety of our facilities. Sorry, this thing's a little delayed. There it is. So again, some of these priorities that we looked at, and again, these are listed, by number. This isn't our top priority necessarily. Some schools, there's a lot of variables involved in it. Some schools, they needed additional fencing. Other schools, there was more of a focus on some of the security film that we'll be talking about in a second, or the access control issues. But some of our schools are in absolute need of improved fencing. As you can see behind the woman wearing the mask, that kind of became a homeless camp for a little while, and that's on the grounds of one of our schools. So with that chair back there was also drug paraphernalia and broken bottles. And just additional examples of some of the fencing that we need to invest in to ensure that people can't easily, literally just step over a fence and walk into our campuses. Securing windows. So a locked door is kind of a moot point if it's easy to break a window and reach in and open that door. So what we're looking at doing is doing some security film. Now this security film not only provides a tent, so provides that anonymity of those that are behind it or not being able to see in. It also makes it much more difficult to breach that window. So while somebody could get through it, it's going to provide a significant amount of valuable time that we need to be able to respond appropriately to any issues that may arise. So we kind of looked at specifically around our front doors, our access, and being able to provide additional security measures on those windows so somebody couldn't get through. And then we looked at access control. We have a lot of keys and a lot of key cylinders throughout Tucson Unified School District. And we try to maintain a very close eye on all those keys to make sure that they don't get out too much. And as such, not everybody has access to those keys. Plus, it just becomes challenging as a teacher in their day-to-day or any other staff member on a school in their day-to-day operations to constantly use a physical key. So what we're looking at is utilizing additional access control, electronic access control. It makes it far easier. So we can avoid situations like this where, again, the door lock may work perfectly, but if it's not utilized, it's a moot point. Sorry, I'm jumping around here. Can you advance it, Gene? This thing's not working right. Thank you. So of these 13 schools, you'll kind of go through and you'll see some of the issues that we identified and the associated costs. Worked again very closely with the facilities department to identify and get quotes on what these items would cost to make those improvements. And we came up just shy of about $2.5 million that we're going to be asking for. Gee. And this isn't done. We're going to continue to work and continue to do our site assessments on our schools, not only to find those critical infrastructure improvements that we feel we need to make, but also no-cost or low-cost items. And inviting some of our public safety partners or other partners from around both regionally and federal partners to kind of get those eyes and give us some ideas of where we can improve our policies. We're currently teaming up with the Arizona Crime Counterterrorism Information Center, or ACTIC, up in Phoenix, who is providing us some additional training on threat vulnerability assessments, i.e. site assessments, and how we can kind of go through those processes and again, try to identify not only the ways to harden the target, but different policies or procedures that we can put in place to also improve the safety of our students and staff. So again, like we talked about, this will be a multi-step process, and this is kind of that first step. These are the ones we identify that we feel are the most critical in need and need to be moved upon a little quicker. Next slide, Gene. So before we go to questions, I know as we've presented this to some of the other members, we oftentimes get the question about, well, how long will this take? So for this, I wanted to turn it over to Greg.
Good evening, everyone. Yeah, in regard to the timeline for some of these improvements that we would like to make, we would need to, first of all, get with our vendors to determine what those timelines would be, specifically in regard to the fencing and the access control systems. The easier one for us to, I guess, complete quicker would be the window film. So that one, I think that we could have that done in pretty short order, really, in terms of how we can get that done quickly. And so that would be kind of an idea, at least for the board, what we'd be looking at here. We'd have to come back to you with a better idea of when we could do the fencing, when that could be done, how fast that could be done, and also the access control. So that's kind of where we're at on that right now.
So with that, we'll take any questions that you guys may have.
Okay, board members.
Lots of hands.
We're going to go with Ms. Luna Rose and Dr. Ravi, then Ms. Shaw.
Okay.
Okay, great.
Thank you, Mr. Helms. Appreciate the presentation. As I'm looking, Jean, can we get back up the security site assessment? Thank you. And maybe I missed it. I was trying to keep up and take my notes. Shoemaker and Pister and Wheeler, how come there's no access numbers for those?
So those schools already have some access control.
That's what I figured.
And we're really, again, kind of focusing on those schools that have none or just need improvements in different areas. Now, both those schools could use additional, but again, we're trying to, really focus on and keeping, budgets in mind, trying to really focus on where we can utilize the resources that we may get most effectively.
Okay, and then a follow-up question to that. I know in this, you also said in the presentation, I think it was the last slide, all TUSD high schools will be assessed first. So assessed in terms of future assessments after these ones, or is this simultaneous?
So this is additional training that we're getting with some of our federal partners, specifically Department of Homeland Defense, and just trying to educate our individuals on how they can do better site assessments going forward. So while we can lay eyes on these and we have some training, it's always better to get additional training and provide more insight into, what is the most updated things we can put in place to make them the safest as possible. The other benefit to that is oftentimes when you do these, a lot of federal grants or other resources that may be available will oftentimes require these type of more federal level organized by either federal or local law enforcement site assessments. In fact, the information that we would be getting will actually be housed with Department of Homeland Security. So we can kind of share that information going forward. But again, sometimes they'll need that before we can even begin to ask for any kind of grants for infrastructure improvements.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, Dr. Ravi?
Thank you, President Grijalva, and thank you, Mr. Hallam, for coming here with this proposal. I know there's a lot of work that went into it, and when the governing board approved the funding for the school safety positions and other positions in the department, that was really shortly after the Uvalde shootings. We asked for that not to be the end point, but to really do some of this work to really figure out how to increase the physical security and other safety features in our schools to really help protect our community and our most vulnerable students. So I really appreciate all the work that went into it. My question specifically was on the door locks, and it was door locks and access. And so, and on here it says access cards. Are we looking at door locks for individual classrooms so that there is an active shooter or something happening in the school, an intruder, that we can make sure there's safety locks and other things for the individual classrooms, or is this only for this access to the building itself?
This specifically is going to be exterior doors, electronic access control. Okay. Now, in an ideal world, we would love to put electronic door locks on all of our locks and within our schools because it's much easier to control that way. You know, if we don't want somebody to have access, we can easily do that in a computer. We're just not in a position to do that at this point. So the best thing we can do at this point is really look at those exterior doors where we can have access control and update those as we go forward.
Do we know if our schools have the individual door locks for the classrooms, or is there any kind of safety measures if in case there is some kind of active shooter or something?
As far as I know, I mean, we should. All of our doors for our classrooms have locks, so they're all lockable doors. That is something we constantly check on an ongoing basis and work closely with facilities if there's any issues to address and if there's any problems.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah.
Board Member Shaw.
Thank you, and thank you for the presentation. Jean, if you could go back to the security site assessment slide. A couple more back.
Security site assessments?
Site assessment,
Okay, I'm sorry,
yeah.
he couldn't hear you. It's slide 8, I think.
Thank you.
Jean.
Okay. Oh, there we go. I just had some questions about the security film and looking at this chart, like at some of the schools, the security film cost is more than the fence and security cameras. And so I think you explained it a bit, but the film would basically darken the window, and would it also fortify the glass more so that if someone was trying to break it with bullets or, whatever, it would take longer?
So it will not make it bulletproof or bullet resistant.
Okay.
But what it will do is, if you've ever seen a broken windshield, I mean, fire departments have to pull out the jaws of life to get through a windshield of a car. That's kind of what it does. It provides that really thick 3M type film on it to really fortify the window. So it'll still break, but it makes it extremely difficult to actually go through that window once it's broken.
Okay.
And the cost associated with it, yes, it's expensive. It's an expensive material to do. And some of these schools have significantly more windows that are easily approached by an individual from the outside. Booth Thicket, for example, although that one's not as expensive, but Sam Hughes, for example, just has a lot of perimeter windows that are easily accessible. So therefore, there's additional cost to that.
Okay, thank you.
I have another question.
Go ahead, Ms. Inaros.
I believe it's for Mr. Meyer. In terms of vendors, do we already have these vendors not on staff, but we already have contact
On
with?
contract?
Thank you.
Yeah,
On contract,
yeah, they
or
are
would
on
they have
contract.
to be new ones that we'd have to do an
No.
RFP and all that?
No, they would be on contract.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay, so that would definitely shorten the time to
That
get
would
some.
certainly help.
Okay.
Right. Yeah,
Thank
that's
you.
a good question, but yeah.
The one issue that I know is big on a lot of our schools is that perimeter security fencing, where you have the really tall, usually a bright colored fence that was welded, and then that ends somewhere on the perimeter, and then you get to the chain link. And sometimes those are, I remember when I was advocating for Leonard Guides, they did all the fencing all around the front, but if you just went around the corner, you could see where you could jump over and get onto campus. So I know that these are some of these priorities, but we do have some schools that are not on this list that we really need to look at as well. So I'm just wondering, I know this is the first ask for the schools that really we need to focus on right this minute, but then when are we going to start looking at some of those other situations where?
Right away. I mean,
Yeah.
this is kind of an evaluation. Obviously, capital is a big part of this, or any of the resources we can allocate. Clearly we can see on this it's costly to make these repairs, and we would love to go in and be able to live in a world where we can make all the repairs and all the updates that we need tomorrow. Unfortunately, we're just not there. So as funding comes more available, I think we'll continue to look at this. We have in our back pockets where we want to go with the schools next, and we'll continue to present plans asking for those resources going forward.
Okay,
I don't know
and
if Dr. Trujillo wants to add to that as
go ahead,
well.
Dr. Trujillo.
Yeah, and then, every single year, the board has a policy that requires it to spend down 20% of its plant funds. You're going to start to see us bringing those proposals that are going to be more safety and security infrastructure centric. That's going to start showing up. In the past, when we've done plant fund proposals, we've kind of been able to take care of other stuff. But now I think you're going to see that funding source is going to be kind of dedicated to these types of proposals. And currently you have just over $6 million there. For those of you watching in the public, the plant fund is under the authority of the board. It's the fund that houses all of the different funds and the revenue that the district earns through rentals, leases, and the sale of vacant properties. The board every single year has to take action to vote to spend at least 20% of the standing fund. So I think that becomes sort of another avenue for us to look at another tier of schools. And then, of course, there's also the capital conversation. We're very nervous that Prop 123 is going away and it's done, fiscal year 25. That's going to present an additional hardship to get these types of things done. So we'll be relying on plant funds more than ever.
Okay, and then I'm sorry if I was out of the room when you covered the type of fencing. Is it going to be a combination of what's pictured and chain link, or?
Yeah, so it'll be a combination of both. We have the wrought iron fencing is presented
Wrought
here
iron,
in this,
thank you.
that obviously needs to be addressed. But any chain link fencing we want to take up significantly higher. So some of those we can actually add to them. Not ideal. We'd love to have wrought iron around all of our campuses, but again, it's just not fiscally possible at this point.
And it's more affordable, right, to just add to the top of the chain link, or not
Correct.
necessarily?
Correct.
Okay.
And there's some variables involved in that.
Right,
but
if
yes.
it's not steady or whatever. Okay. Any other questions? All right. Ms. Luna Rose, and then Dr. Ravi, and then I think we might have enough info to vote.
Just one more question, and maybe this is a Dr. Trujillo question. Can the school facilities board give us funding for at least fence and security?
Unfortunately, and we'll invite Greg up here, and then even Damon, who's, gone rounds back and forth with School Facilities Board. Unfortunately, they only cover major systems, roofing, plumbing, electrical, that are in a total state of disrepair. There may be some. Damon, if you want to, do you have any good news? My sense is probably not.
Unfortunately not. So the State Facilities Board identifies the 7 areas of infrastructure in a site. That's roofing, electrical, your HVAC, special systems, special equipment, surfaces, and then our adjacent ways. Unfortunately, this does not fall under that umbrella.
All right, that is unfortunate, but thank you.
Dr. Ravi?
Thank you. So the $2.5 million cost of this project, so where is that exactly coming from? Because from my understanding from the projections that this board has already allocated not only all of our total capital revenue for this fiscal year, but also all of our carry forward from the prior years. So we would then go in the deficit for capital and it was eat into the M&O carry forward, or where would this money come from?
You have Dr. Shaw, you've got a couple of different options. Number one, you can split fund it. You could take a look at your plant funds to maybe take a portion of it there. We also can take a look at some of the M&O carry forward that you may want to use to cover the balance. We also have some one-time expenditure capacity available in some of the auxiliary funds that we have to be able to cover. So the board does have some options in terms of where it goes from here. And when we look at the list of schools, certainly if there's any magnet schools on there, I see Davis, I see Ross Scrooge. there's definitely the open conversation about using DSEG capital. Certainly when you've got those magnet schools or you've got those USP program schools there, that's always a fair conversation. So we've got some options.
Okay, so right now, the motion in the agenda is to approve it just capital facilities upgrades, and then right now it says unrestricted capital, but that, should we change the motion to include some other, or other fundies that's available? How do you want us to say that?
I'm going to turn it over to Rob at this point because I know that the usage of plan funds was not noted in the public BAI language. I'm not sure, Mr. Ross, if we would even be able to entertain that motion without a separate agenda item at a next meeting.
Thank you, Dr. Trujillo. Since it is substantially related to the content of the agenda item, the board could modify a motion to direct to particular funds. It is substantially related to the posted item.
Okay, so we could also say the budget source would be unrestricted capital, plant funds, or DSEG capital, and we'll ask administration to just let us know where it comes from.
That's correct.
And then we can vote for the total expenditure. Okay. Any other questions? Does that make sense? So we're going to ask them to look at every other possible funding source. Okay, all right, so I'll go ahead and motion to approve the administration's requested package of capital and facilities upgrades in the area of safety and security infrastructure. The dollar amount is $2.5 million, and the budget source would be unrestricted capital, DSEG capital, and plant funds. And then you'll let us know where they're allocated. Okay, so that's a motion.
I'll second.
I have a motion and a second by Dr. Ravi. All in favor say aye. Aye. Opposed? Item passes unanimously. Thank you for the presentation. Now we're on to TUSD Communicable Disease Outbreak Task Force. Final recommendations. Please vote online. Thank you. Dr. Trujillo.
Yes, President Grijalva, members of the board, I want to welcome back Mr. Gah, our Director for Health Services, with tonight's final recommendations and request from the Communicable Disease Task Force. Thank you.
Very good. Good evening.
Good evening.
Good evening.
I am happy to say that my motion is going to be a lot easier to digest with today. Sure, I'm going to forward that. Great, thank you. So the slides that you have gotten are prior slides as well, so I'm going to hop to slide 7. Which is basically why we are here today. So basically, the task force is basically asking, can we continue our work through the end of the school year? We have started basically though it was charged to us in April, we began our work in August, and we have a lot of big momentum going, and we also have a pretty robust tasks that are basically planned here between now and May. We want to basically provide you with a reliable after-action review of how TUSD, from the employee perspective, handled the reaction to the recent pandemic, as well as to what we have learned out of that particular process. We would also like to basically review what our current policies are and see if there's any future changes in there as well. And we want to really create a uniform approach as to how we handle all health-related issues moving forward. With that being said, if you allow us to move forward on this into May, we would then basically represent to you what we have accomplished, and if we can actually then consider consider becoming a designated committee that will handle handle these situations moving forward. And then we also had added on there the last fantastic suggestion from board member Shaw about possible time to serve on that particular district-wide task force as well. With that being said, we are asking that you please allow us to move forward all the way through May.
Okay.
With that, do you have any questions?
Board members, any questions? Dr. Ravi?
Thank you, Mr. Goff, for the presentation. I read the report, and I was really excited about the enthusiasm that you and the committee had for not just continuing through May, but potentially making this into a permanent task force. I mean, this is going to be things are going to be changing all the time in terms of what is going to be the infection or other issue on the health and safety front that's going to be affecting our schools. Just this morning, I had my first positive RSV case in one of my patients, and that's been making headlines, throughout our nation with the outbreaks that we're having. And so I had a 3-year-old who tested positive, and so that we have to be nimble and do what we can in terms of changing, whether it's the monkeypox that was in the report and some suggestions on how to manage that amongst especially those that have a lot of physical contact, like wrestlers and other subgroup of populations, and other infections that come down the pipeline. So I think this is a great recommendation. And I'm really excited we have some emphasis on this as a district.
Thank you.
Did you want to move the item?
I'll move the item.
Okay.
And I'll second.
All right.
Can I make
Yeah, of course. Have a motion, a second, and then Ms. Luna Rose, you have a question?
Or just more of a comment.
Okay.
Mr. God, I just wanted to say thank you. I really do appreciate your daily reports. I sort of look forward to them because they kind of come in during my workday, and I hear this little ding, and there you are. So
That's good. If it's
always
helpful, that's
appreciate
good.
the participation.
Thank you.
But I just wanted to say to everybody on this committee, thank you so much for their time. It shows that we do have leadership here and people that want to make a change and be part of this community, and something like this that affects not just our school district but the whole city and state.
Yes.
I really appreciate everybody's leadership and time, and if they're listening tonight, thank you so much, and please keep being involved on the committee. So thank you.
Okay.
Thank you.
Ms. Shaw?
Thank you, and thank you, Mr. Goff, for the presentation. I do think that this should be a board committee. I was in favor of that long ago. And looking at the list of people on it, there's a lot of people, but only 2 parents. I hope we can boost up those numbers.
We're trying.
For sure. And I wonder if, as far as communicable diseases, if there's any collaboration between El Rio health centers to, so we can provide a resource for students to take care of issues that we may not be able to as a school district. I know that El Rio, if you're 14 to 24, you can receive STI testing, contraceptives, all kinds of things for free under Title 10, I believe. And so are we collaborating with El Rio at all?
So that's a really excellent question. We have part of this goal of this particular task force is to accomplish goals for the 1-year approach and multiple years out as well. And there are a lot of school districts nationwide that have that partnership process as well. So we have definitely been talking about those avenues, yes.
Okay, because I was speaking to some people who work for El Rio specifically about some of those resources, and it seemed like they were really interested in collaborating, even just as far as giving the district posters that outlines the resources that they have available.
Thank you, ma'am.
Thank you.
Okay. Thank you for the presentation. We have a motion and a second. All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Item passes unanimously. Thank you.
All right, everybody, thank you.
Thanks. 8.3, TUSD student dress code and regulations. Dr. Trujillo.
Grijalva, members of the governing board. As requested, we brought the existing dress code policy forward for public discussion of our governing board. The policy was last revised in April of 2019. We wanted to bring the item forward here. This governing board, who has not had an opportunity, our board members that came in after April 2019, to actually take a look at and have a conversation about the state of the dress code. The administration stands by, ready to take any direction, any suggestions for modification, which procedurally would result in us coming back for a first read that then would go out for public review. Based off of tonight's discussion or direction or suggestions, when we do come back for a first read, there would be a lot more student mobilization on our end, okay? So we wanted to get a first feel for what the governing board is thinking with the policy. That way we can appropriately engage our student leadership groups. So at the policy level, we will make sure that they are here and able to engage with our board members prior to any vote on policy change.
Okay, I do think on this policy where it says school enforcement of dress code on page 3, school level dress codes shall be written and enforced using gender neutral language. That's not happening at all. I mean, we heard it here at one school. I've heard it from several of our high schools. And discussions with the student about violations of dress standards shall be held in a way that maintains the student's privacy and dignity. That's not happening either. We have students that are being called out in the middle of class, being, and that's just not okay. So I don't know if this school enforcement of dress codes has to be at the very tippity top of this policy to let people know that it's not okay to do that. And really, overwhelmingly, I had another student who talked to me about the fact that she could be wearing the exact same piece of clothing that another student who has a different body type is wearing, and she'll get dress coded, and the other student won't. Same length. It does. I mean, our students are shaped very differently. Everyone is unique, and all of these standards should be applied exactly the same, and that's not happening. We have some students, I can give you names of some students that just randomly said, wait a minute, you're on the governing board, I want to ask you a question. Why is it that I get dress coded, but my friend over here who wears the exact same outfit doesn't get dress coded? And our shorts are the exact same size, she's like, and I'm okay with having rules, but I want to make sure that we all have to follow them the same. And so I think that is something that we really should look at. And I understand that individual schools have different ways of enforcing, let's say, even uniforms. We have some schools that you drive by, it's a uniform school, and I wouldn't know because everyone's wearing like a shirt over with really baggy stuff. The colors might not match. As far as you have certain things that you can wear. So my example is Dodge. Dodge has an incredibly strict dress code. Really strict, where it has to, if you're wearing a jacket over, it has to have a zipper so you can unzip it when you walk in, and so they can clearly see that you are wearing the uniform. Then you have other schools that, have a very sort of, it's up to interpretation kind of thing, which for every school, that's fine. I just think that in some of those cases where it comes to dress code, we should have some consistency, ideally just district-wide, if that's possible. Dr. Trujillo, go ahead.
So just two thoughts and maybe some suggestions. I think it's reflective of the shifting attitudes, beliefs, and passion points about student dress that have evolved over the years, have changed over the years. I know that in a former time and a place, even 6 years ago, 7 years ago now, time flies, when I came into the district, at that time it was very much around student dress code, around school administrative and campus community autonomy. Each school needed to have their own way of enforcement. I think as we've seen over the last 7 years, attitudes and beliefs and opinions shifting around student dress, I think we're at a place now where we need to develop a centralized regulation around enforcement. We don't have one. And I think maybe that's something we partner with a TEA and with Eli and really develop one. I think at this point, that's probably the only way that we're going to be able to get the consistency that we're looking for and that we see with more centralized regulations like what we see with the Code of Conduct. I also think that the board might want to consider some of the wording here that may put our administrators in some tough spots. So for example, when you have when you look under the school dress code required at every single school, and you have a clause in here that says clothing must cover undergarments. And somebody that has served at a site, a large high school, I'm not dress coding anybody because that means you're approaching somebody who has a different body shape and that they might be wearing the same size shirt as somebody else, but due to that body shape, there might be undergarments exposed. If you take action on that, there's 4 other people of different body shapes watching you. Mm-hmm. And so what you're having in a sense is a lot of administrators just won't even go near it. I think a regulation would solve a lot of this in terms. Now, the challenge with that is the takeaway from that is we're going to have a centralized, consistent set of enforcement expectations across the district. And I would say when developing that, we have to probably look at differences between elementary and secondary immediately. So it might look different for elementary and secondary. But we're going to be giving away, the give has to be like, there's not going to be as much autonomy for schools to make that determination on their own. So when you have 86 different ways of interpreting enforcement, the problem becomes, or the challenge becomes less about the wording of the policy. There are some areas here that I think we could work on, and it becomes more of just a lack of centralized regulation around enforcement.
Okay. Any other questions, comments? Ms. Shaw.
Thank you. So I put this on the agenda because when I was visiting McGee Middle School, I noticed many students being dress coded for wearing pajama pants. And, you know, I think that's the whole other side of the spectrum. There's people being dress coded for, you know, having shoulders and having a spaghetti strap shirt on. But then there's, you know, people specifically, girls who are dress coded for wearing like a loose fitting pant. And I think, of course, that it's our female identified students who are feeling the brunt of this policy. But I also want to point out, can we scroll down to the gang-related portion of this? And so I think also students of color are being, I guess, more penalized about wearing certain colors, whereas another student of a different ethnicity might not be dress coded for wearing a color that might be affiliated with a gang. And so I think there's a lot of work to be done about this. I hope that our school staff are, you know, really considering, like, is this the battle you want to choose? Because there's other issues that, you know, are more important and that don't get addressed. And I just think it's inappropriate for us to be, you know, removing students from class and pointing them out and making them feel a certain way just because they're wearing something that's pretty standard in our culture. You know, and as far as wearing like spaghetti strap shirts, like, you know, this is a very hot climate most of the year, and so I just want us to be aware of that, and I hope that we can find a happy medium.
Thank you. So I think, Dr. Trujillo, you indicated that you were going to sort of work on this and bring it back to us.
As I hear the board weigh in, I see it as enforcement inconsistency that is probably driving a lot of the student frustrations. I'm not hearing that the board has really any issues with the actual wording of the policy. which we can also address by coming back on a second read. But our end of it, I do think, is looking at a centralized regulation, I think is needed. So I would just kind of survey the board here. Do you have any thoughts or direction or suggestions on any portion of the verbiage that's here in this policy?
So considering the time and that we still have a couple other items, perhaps I have a couple of issues, and so I'll send those directly to you, Dr. Trujillo.
Okay.
And then if I can encourage my colleagues to do the same. So if there's any specific verbiage in there that we have an issue with, then when it comes back to us, perhaps that can be addressed. Okay? All right. Thank you. So I don't think we're going to take any action on that one. That will be study. Okay, now we're on 8.4, authorization for governing board members and superintendent to attend the National School Boards Association Conference on April 1st through 3rd, 2023, Orlando, Florida. Dr. Trujillo, I think you put this on, because we had a request from, actually, I think I might have asked to put it on because we get early. It's some sort of deal where if you early bird special or something like that. So I want to say, I know that there was some criticism about attending these conferences. I found them to be incredibly beneficial. I don't think our governing board members have an opportunity to do enough professional development, but some of us that are able to go to Phoenix do. I know Ms. Shaw recently went and spent 2 nights there. And what I think perhaps might be a good suggestion after we vote on this item is to have there be a summary, like maybe quarterly on a consent agenda of what reimbursement or expenses have been generated by board members. And so that way it can be calculated and added to, and on an annual basis, you'll see whether you participate in one of these conferences or not. My guess is it's going to be very similar. Some years I haven't gone to any conferences, haven't gone to any professional development training, and so I think over the year it's incredibly beneficial. But I also think that if there's any question about how board members, whether we're reimbursed for mileage, whether we, whatever we're doing, I do think that that is something that could be done in a public meeting so we can address what those costs might be. But I'd like to go ahead and move this item.
I'll second.
Okay, so I have a motion, a second by Dr. Ravi. Any discussion? Ms. Shaw.
Yes, thank you. Yeah, I did attend the law conference a few months ago, and, it was fun. It was mostly a networking event, to be quite honest, and I learned some things. And, it was expensive. I don't know the cost of it off the top of my head, but what I do know is that I came back a few pounds lighter because I couldn't afford the meals, and I still haven't been reimbursed for the meals and the gas that I was able to pay for. And so, yeah, this is quite a lot. It's a lot of money. Are we even a part of NSBA?
Yes.
We are.
I do think one of the things that I recommended to staff is when it's possible for board members to get the per diem check ahead of time. So that way like what you have, so you don't have to hold on to receipts and do that. And also to be really clear on what the accommodations cover. So from this date to this date, and if you choose to stay longer, that's something that would come out of, every board member would pay for that. I think that all of that stuff is really easy to do. And so, and I support professional development, and this is not something that I would benefit from, but it's open to any board member who would like to or not. So that's why it says 5 governing board members and superintendent. And a lot of governing boards attend with the entire board and their superintendent fairly regularly. So we have a motion, a second. Go ahead, Ms. Luna Rose.
Okay. I just want to make a comment. I went to my first NSBA earlier this year, and there was only 2 board members that attended. And it was a good learning experience for me as a newer board member yes, it can be a networking event, but I also met other people from other districts who are doing amazing things, and it's nice to step out of the TUSD bubble or Arizona bubble of what's going on here, about how supportive their communities are, or their state, or what they're doing and not doing, and maybe bringing that back here and learning that schools in Wisconsin have 9-member school boards for districts of children with 3,000 students. So it opens up your eyes. We were definitely one of the largest to attend, and the questions I got was like, well, how do you deal with that, and what are you doing? And so it was a nice discussion to remember why we're doing this and why we're sitting here on the dais and what we want to see for our community. So, and it's also because of open meeting laws, it's hard for us to be able to talk outside of this without any sort of violation. But if we go as a board, then we're able to chat and over a meal, or a couple of us sitting in a session. And yes, there were other Southern Arizona districts there that their whole board was there. And their superintendent. And it was very cohesive, and I just think if you can go, it's a nice opportunity. It's not necessary. I didn't really think of it as a party because it was very go, go, go. And I spent a lot of time sleeping. So outside the conference, I was, it's very interactive, and they make it so you're coming back with things that you need for your district. So I'm in support of it.
All right, have a roll call vote, please.
Ms. Luna Rose?
Yes.
Dr. Ravi?
Yes.
Ms. Shaw?
No.
Ms. Grijalva?
Yes. Item passes 3-1 with Ms. Shaw voting no. All right, now we're on 8.5, Governing Board Policy BG, Board Policy Process, first reading. Dr. Trujillo or Mr. Ross?
Yes, President Grijalva, board members, I will turn this item over to Mr. Ross for the first read of the board policy process revision.
Thank you, Dr. Trujillo. We've spent the last couple of years kind of working with this. This policy was revised, I think, 4 or 5 years ago, and it was a pretty big change at the time. And so we've been watching how it's been working. And this is, you'll notice that the actual policy BG proposal changes are pretty minor. We've added where policy initiatives might come from in terms of adding the state legislature, and then clarifying that, and you all know this, you've actually done this, is that the board can skip a level of process if it wants to, send it back. The board always has that authority. We just wanted to make that very clear. I guess the biggest change is in the flow chart. And if you could pull that up, Jean, it's one of the other attachments. But we took a look at the original kind of almost typewritten looking flow chart, BG-1, which was the exhibit that's part of that, and we've kind of made it a little bit more interactive and descriptive. The biggest change I would say there is, I would point out there, is that we're trying to streamline when this gets to the community level, and the way the current flow chart is you keep sending back revisions to like the employee groups and SCPC, but the practice of the board has been, you may get a first read and you don't even want it to go any further. So why are we going to bother our employee groups with a proposal that is never going to see the light of day in its current form or in any form? So what we're clarifying here, proposed clarifying here, is that we're not going to send those proposals unless the board has said, yes, we want you to send it forward, because that's been the practice. So we're making this reflect the practice. I think this flow chart is a little more engaged, easily able to be engaged than the previous flow chart. Again, but the substance here is not really big changes. So this is a first read proposal. If the board wants to send it out for comment and then bring it back or make any other suggestions to us.
Okay, board members? All right. Oh, I'm sorry. Did you put your hand up?
Yeah.
Okay, go ahead, Dr. Ravi.
Thank you, President Grijalva. So I think, when I looked at the flow chart, what I see we do in practice oftentimes is that we'll do some revisions and then go straight to public comments as opposed to approving it as is. And so we kind of rely on you and our other legal attorney here to just take the feedback for the revisions. And then I'm not sure if it gets posted with the revisions or comes back to us with the revisions, but that's kind of what we've done in practice a lot. So I'm not sure how to institutionalize that a little bit more, because that's I think almost every time we do any kind of change, we just still get the comments, come to a second read. So we're not going back to the whole revision of the policy and come back to another first read. So what would you suggest in terms of how to actionize what we tend to do?
So we have the box there about board revision, and then we have the arrow going back to staff. But there's also always that ability for the board to make a change on the dais and then send it out in that new form, that revised form. We can incorporate that into this chart if that's the default. The way this default is that if you're going to change it, then it goes back through staff.
Mm-hmm. And back to the board.
And then
for first
back to the
read,
board.
yeah. Mm-hmm.
And then back to the board.
Which is not what we're doing.
If you are making changes on a first read, then we're not doing that. You're correct. We're putting it out to the public as revised at the first read for public comment. And if we want to make that the default, then we can just change that board revises process to the default being then it goes to first read with public comment and then comes back 30 days later based on the new first, how the board revised it at the first read. So I'm happy to make that change.
Okay, Ms. Shaw.
Thank you. I think this policy is a little bit dangerous because it seems to eliminate the public from being a part of this policy change. And also it seems to, give the board a lot of power to repeal something, change, revise, adopt something, at any moment. And I think, the first read and the second read are important steps because it lets the public know what's happening in regards to our policy. And so I worry that if we were to revise or accept this policy, we're cutting out our constituents.
Ms. Shaw, I don't know if you wanted it somewhere else, but where it goes to governing board meets to review and discuss first reading, study action, the next little box is board approves to post for comment.
But it also says governing board reserves the authority to take action at any time to adopt, revise, or repeal a policy.
Right, because sometimes some of them are just outdated.
Okay.
Like, I don't know. I mean, they just are. Sometimes the law changed, so we have to repeal it. I mean, some of the ones we've seen were written in like 70-something, and so no one abides by it anymore, or that department doesn't exist anymore, so we have to be able to do that.
That's not a change either.
Right,
that's
this is just acknowledging what we do,
and
right?
and also in the existing policy, that language is there as well, but.
And I don't know if you want to put like somewhere in here that we take into account, community comments, maybe instead of just a board approves to post for comment, it's like acknowledging that this is where the community can give their input. Maybe it's not like as obvious. I don't know.
I'm happy to describe the public process more in the policy, how we gather community, the practice of how we gather community comment.
I think that if you don't know what post means, maybe that, if you don't know post for comment means, like if you're not paying attention to how we're running, that could be an opportunity for us to expand on that for community comment or input or something. Any other suggestions or thoughts? Okay. All right, so with that addition, do you all want this to come back? This is a first read, so it can come back if you'd like. Or we can take action. What would you like to do?
I think we should put it out for a first read.
So do you want to go ahead and post it for community input?
So,
Absolutely.
Go
so we
go ahead,
move it
Dr.
to-
Ravi.
So then we make a motion to accept the first read and post for community comment
Yeah.
Go ahead.
We're just motion to approve the attached proposed revisions.
with the
and-
revisions that we recommend.
Yeah, and then just a little bit fleshing out of the post for comment section. Any other? Okay, I'll go ahead and make that motion.
I'll second.
I have a motion, a second by Dr. Ravi. Any discussion? All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Item passes unanimously.
Thank you.
Thank you. And now we are on 8.6, Board Policy IJL, Library Materials Selection and Adoption. This is a first read, and this is a revision.
Yes,
Go
President Grijalva, board members, second of our 3 policy items tonight. Split duties. So now we'll shift it over to the Associate General Counsel, Mr. Aronoff.
Okay, sir, all yours.
Good evening. Thank you. We are approaching the end of our list of policy changes based on legislation that went into effect September 25th. These last 2 sort of got delayed because their real effective date for most of the changes that we need are kind of later. So this first one, related to library materials, the legislation talks about, requires us to allow parents basically to have access to library materials and to be able to obtain the list of materials checked out by their students, as well as to begin enacting policies or procedures, on January 1st, related to the acquisition of new library materials. These rules specifically by statute, we have to have this policy in the statute, and we have to have this limitation that says that the schools that do not have a full-time library media specialist or equivalent position are exempt from those particular procedures. So this language really just tracks what we're obligated to have by statute and policy. We do have procedures all lined up, ready to roll out beginning in the new year related to acquisitions, and we will flesh those out a little bit more in regulation. But this policy effectively contains what needs to be in the policy. This is a first read, so the action requested today is just to post for public comment.
Okay, board members, questions, comments? I'll go ahead and move the item.
I'll second.
So this is a motion to approve the attached proposed revisions and put it out for public comment. I have a motion and a second by Ms. Luna Rose. All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? Item passes unanimously. Thank you. And now we are on 8.7, Governing Board Policy IKF, Graduation Requirements Revision. This is a first read. Dr. Trujillo and Mr. Aronoff.
Mr. Aronoff, you're staying with us for this one, right?
I am.
Okay.
So this adjustment to IKF is also based on new legislation. You will see in the red line revision that there is a lot of red, but mostly that's because a lot of things we sort of shifted around for the sake of clarity of presentation. There's not a lot of substantive addition. The biggest substantive addition and the legislative change that prompted us to bring this back is in the social studies section of the chart, where it talks about the requirement for the civics exam and from the United States Citizenship and Immigration Services exam. That's a new requirement. It is effective for the class of 2026. So we've separated out, up through the graduating class of 2025. This won't apply. Beginning for the class of 2026, we're now obligated to include this additional graduation requirement, and then we've laid out the statutory requirements surrounding that in that section. Most everything else, as I said, has remained the same. We have updated things just to make sure that we're consistent with the statute and rules that apply. But like I said, a lot of the red is really just shifting things around in the policy for the sake of clarity. This also is a first read, so we're just asking to post for public comment at this point.
Okay, board members, Questions? I'll go ahead and move the item.
I'll second.
I know, I'm sorry.
I'm sorry, I'm just going to throw this out there. My daughter's the graduating class of 2026. So this is going to be, while I want her to learn her civics, it's already just a waste of her time because she's going to be ready. All these kids are going to get ready to go to college and military and life. So
My two youngest will have to deal with that too. Okay. And all of the rest of the babies on the dais. All right, we'll have a motion in a second. All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? Item passes unanimously.
Thank you.
Although reluctantly, I'm sure. Okay. 9.1, fiscal year 23 expenditure update through September 2022. Dr. Trujillo.
Yes, President Grijalva, board members, I'd like to welcome back Mr. Ricky Hernandez for last month's expenditure report.
Welcome back.
Hi there. All right, so this is, we're getting back into the groove of giving you the monthly expenditure updates for the prior month. So this is the expenditure update for everything that posted through the end of September of this current fiscal year. So as you recall, these are the year-to-date fund balances for the major funds or fund groups, or fund types rather, for the fiscal year. These are generally, when you compare these to the presentation that Renee Weatherless gave you in September of 2021, these are on par for the most part with what she presented at that point. The biggest change that you'll find from one year to the next is in federal grants. That is because we are chipping away at ESSER. So last year's federal grant balances was significantly higher to what we have projected currently. But again, ESSER has definitely been a significant part of our federal expenditures over the last 12 months and obviously the first 3 months of the current fiscal year. DSEG, obviously, so DSEG, our DSEG fund types in M&O and capital, we are obviously projecting that we will spend 100% of our DSEG funds. When you break out M&O and capital for non-DSEG, we're currently projecting a balance of about $40.8 million, but I would make sure that I caution board members to consider the fact that this is only the first 90 days of the fiscal year. Based on year-to-date expenditures and encumbrances, this is certainly subject to change, especially in light of the conversation that we had a little while ago regarding compression. Expense type, just expense categories, just how we're spending within each one of these major fund types, the types of groups, the salaries and benefits, and so on. Again, consistent with what we've historically seen around this time of the fiscal year. Within each one of these categories. These are our projected fund balances, and I do want to note a couple of things that you'll see. So losses in the grants section, so you'll see federal grants has a deficit of $12 million, for example, and the building renewal grant has a deficit of $12 million. Most of these close out in the month of September. We are waiting to be reimbursed. These will all be paid up by the Department of Education or by SFOB when those dollars roll in. So those projections will be trued up as dollars become available not become available, as the district is reimbursed by those sources of revenue. Same thing with JTED. You'll notice there's a $3.6 million deficit there. JTED has changed its payment model from a cash basis to a reimbursement one. So we spend and they reimburse us. So as expenses go out, we expect revenues to kind of come back in up to the allocation that JTED provides. But the estimate will be trued up again as we progress over the course of the fiscal year. Oh, too far. Classroom spending estimate. So one of the things that obviously will shock you, considering that we just talked about spending at our highest level in instruction and instructional spending in general, is the fact that instruction right now is, when you look at year-to-date and encumbrances, is around 51%, which is quite a bit less than the 55.8 that we talked about. Again, this is expenditures, year-to-date encumbrances based on the current 90 days that we've progressed. So this is only 90 days of expenses. We've spent about 48% of our budget in instruction. It is still the largest chunk of instruction. When you take a look at September of 2021, it is consistent with the level of expenditures in these categories that we had last fiscal year. So last fiscal year, for year-to-date and encumbrances, we were spending at 54% this time of year. It's 51.5% today. The others, 10.5%. 10.4 last year, 7 and 7.5. The subtotal for the support, the instructional support, was at 72.7, 3% shy of what we are 12 months ago. So these are definitely falling in line with what we've generally spent around this time of the year. So we expect these to move forward and move up as we progress over the course of the fiscal year. People like graphs, so this is graphically. And this is exactly kind of where we are over the first 90 days of the fiscal year. Questions?
Okay, questions, board members? All right, I don't see any.
All righty.
Thank you.
Thank you.
So now we're on 9.2, district enrollment update for school year 22-23, enrollment as of day 40 for the 22-23 school year. Dr. Trujillo.
President Grijalva, members of the board, as a yearly function, every single fall, we do formally present to the governing board the status of enrollment at our 40th day and handling the duties. This year, we've got our team here led by our Chief Operations Officer, Mr. Young, to take us through what we look like enrollment-wise for the 40th day.
Thank you, Dr. Torrio, and good evening, Board President, members of the board staff. As Dr. Torrio said, we're going to go through the 40th day enrollment. As we do that, we'll talk about the enrollment numbers themselves. We're also going to give the board an update on the Enrollment Ambassador Program and the communication focuses, and talk about school year 23-24. We're already thinking about the year ahead, and we've got milestones we want to make you aware of. So just starting out, it's important when we talk about enrollment to give context. There is different ways that we look at enrollment. When we talk about 40th day enrollment, we're talking specifically about the number of kids. It doesn't matter the grade level or what kind of a course load they're carrying. We're talking about the number of kids enrolled in our district. That is simply a count. That number of 40th day is used for planning. It's used in a myriad of ways. But what becomes important when we talk about district finances is something called 100th Instruction Day. And when we talk about that, we have to talk about something called average daily membership. That does take into consideration grade level. It takes into consideration course load. It also, the first 100 days of average daily membership for a school district in Arizona determines the amount of funding the school district gets from ADM. So enrollment count, the number of students enrolled on a specific day, regardless of each student's grade and course load. And then daily membership is what I just described. When we come back to the board after 100th day, we will get into that definition again and provide examples of exactly how that works. But there are some things to understand about average daily membership. When we think about a student and what they contribute to average daily membership, we do that in units of what's called a full-time equivalency. And so there are caveats to that. One of the things in the state of Arizona that the state does not do is it doesn't pay for full day kindergarten. So we only get paid for half a day. So we call that's a half day, a 0.5 FTE for a kindergarten student. Because we know how important kindergarten is, we subsidize the balance as a district. But in terms of funding, we get a half FTE for each student. For ex-ed preschool, we also get the same. We get 0.5 FTE. It's the only preschool funding that comes from the state. Anything else has to be funded by other sources. So just as a couple of examples here, A high school student is only considered full-time if they're carrying four courses. And if they're carrying anything less than that, it steps down by 0.25 based on course load. And so there's just some examples of there, 3 courses, 0.75, 2 courses, 0.5, and so on. There are in the addendum in this presentation some tables that walk you through other scenarios. It does get a little bit more complicated than this because it also matters whether or not the student was with the district the full first 100 days of enrollment for the school year. So now, and then with that little bit of an explanation, we're going to talk about 40th day in the context of the count of kids. One of the things we did this year, normally we would look at current year and then 2 previous years. We're looking at the 5 years. That was one of the requests that came from the board, is to take a full 5-year look. And we're glad you did that, because one of the things that really brings out in the data is what pre-COVID, COVID, and then post-COVID is starting to look like. And you can really see some of the impacts that COVID had on not only on our enrollment, but in a couple slides we'll show you across the county and what that looked like for school districts that surround us. A few highlights from these numbers. The current school year is the far right, 22-23. 40th day and 40th instruction day for this year was on September 30th. Highlights here, one of the things that we wanted to highlight for you was that preschool enrollment continues to trend up. So if you look at 2018-19 and then 19-20, you can see we run normally on preschool somewhere in excess of 1,300 children participating in our programs. But you can see the dip that we took in the 2021 year when the pandemic was in full swing, and we dropped all the way down to 800 kids. The reason that we want to talk about that number is independent of the state's funding for preschool, is that preschool really is a pipeline into our district for kindergarten, much like kindergarten itself is the pipeline for our district for grades K through 12. It's important to note that we are seeing a good recovery there, and Reem was with the board just a few weeks ago to receive grants that are going to really infuse a lot of funding and resources into those programs. The demand is there. Our capacity needs to match the demand, and we'll continue to see that increase. The next thing that we wanted to talk about is that COVID year cohort. So if you look at 2021 again, you'll see that our kindergarten across those 5 years took a big dip. We went from 3359 in 1920 all the way down to 2709. As I already explained about how important that is for the entry into our system, that was quite a huge dip. And you'll see the next year, we recovered quite a bit in our kindergarten. We went up to 3056, and then we saw a drop again this year. One of the things I wanted to highlight about the 2021 cohort is if you walk that down, so you'll see for 21-22, that became our first grade cohort, kindergarten, the previous year. We actually recovered students there. So you'll see that we recovered about 130 plus students that came back into our system as a result of families choosing once again our schools and to come back. There could be some incidental data in there, but by and large that was families returning to us. And then we saw, albeit nominal, we saw the same thing happen again for the current school year, where we saw additional kids in excess of 50 that returned to that cohort. That cohort will move through our entire system. So just from a purely numbers perspective, that's very important. When you look at all of the grade bands for elementary, kinder through 5, elementary was slightly down. The bigger concern for the district remains to be in our middle school population, where we see a larger loss at our middle school. And if you just scan grades 6, 7, and 8 across the 5-year period, you can see where we were in 18-19 versus where we are today. And so when we talk about our middle school, there are initiatives underway looking at how we address middle school in our school system from a programmatic approach, from a structural approach, and we will be bringing things back to the board about that. And that's important because that is going to be part of the overall strategy to recover our enrollment back to the levels that they were pre-pandemic. The other thing that we wanted to note was for high school. High school remained largely flat, and if you look at the numbers, The reason that we wanted to call that out is because normally we see our families will leave at our middle school grades and then they'll return for high school. They want the programs that we offer in high school. They want that experience for their students, even if they went to a charter or another offering. But we didn't quite see that return this year in the same manner we did. Well, we did see it, and the numbers between middle school and high school bear that out. So there are some things that we're continuing to do to analyze our data to understand that. When we look at the 5 years across the county, you'll see family choices and what was some likely impacts of why that enrollment is not more. This particular slide just shows that same data, but it shows the trend line. One of the things, particularly for our newer board members, that we like to highlight is if you look at the shape of the curve, regardless of where it is by school year, and you'll see that we have 5 school years here, the trend is always generally the same. We start to peak up around the 40th day, and then we gradually trend down. So even for the current school year, you see that orange line at the bottom that only goes out to the 44th instructional day. That's exactly is happening there, and we really anticipate that line will over time will have that same shape to it, and then it will slowly trend down as we approach 100th day. If you look at the closing of the gap in that line to the previous school year, there's not really enough data points there to confirm that it really will trend up closer. So 15 years of data tells us that generally this is what our enrollment always trends like. So now I want to go to a slide that's going to show us a comparison across the county. You can see here familiar districts that are public districts. We show charters as a category combined, and then we also show just some incidental other districts as well. But one of the things that we wanted to call out here is that Pima County schools increased across this 5-year period less than 0.5%. We're not largely growing, in our county, at least at those age levels. So what that means is that there's more competition for a similar number of kids for many, many choices for families. And one of the things that we see across that 5-year period is they're choosing charters in multiple cases, 14.3% increase across that time frame. Districts as a whole, public school districts lost about 2.1%. There were some districts that notably gained, and of course that is Vail, Tanca Verde, and Marana. These are our suburban school districts. This is a phenomenon that we see with urban school districts very often. We will see flight to the suburbs for various reasons. There's a lot of factors that contribute to that, but those are our districts that are increasing enrollment, and it really on a national level, you see the same phenomenon with urban school districts and their surrounding districts. However, the other thing that we wanted to talk about here is we look at who the larger losers were. Of course, TUSD is in the middle of that, but you can see Amphi and Sunnyside lost significant enrollment. So if you look at us at the top with over a 5-year period of being down about 7.8%, then you also see that those school districts are in the same neighborhood, with Sunnyside being 6.7 and then Amphi being 9.4, in terms of enrollment. Where did those kiddos go? In many cases, they probably went to charters or they went to other online options other than our own. And so I want to talk about that because the board approved made a major contribution to our overall enrollment strategy with the approval of TUVD moving forward as our AOI. We believe that that's going to be an important part of the district's gaining enrollment beyond our boundaries and perhaps even on a state level over time, because we are clear with the consultation we've done on a state level and what we're seeing happening nationally, that we've got a very strong offering in how we've structured those programs. What we're going to do in the middle school area with our kinder through grade 5 and 6 will also be areas that we anticipate will be a shifter of our baseline. And one of the things that was true on the data right before the pandemic, we had done structural things as a district to increase enrollment. We went to a green light system, making our schools available largely over 75% of our schools to all families. We also added enrollment ambassadors. We added summer enrollment specialists. We were starting to see trends reverse in that right before the pandemic year, where we were seeing much smaller losses in our enrollment. It actually shifted the baseline of our enrollment trends. And we believe that these things that we're doing now will put us back in a position to see those shifts again. So with that, I'm going to take a pause and see if the board has any questions before we go ahead and move to Ms. Christina Grabowski to talk about our Enrollment Ambassador Program.
Questions, board members? Okay.
Okay. All right, then we'll turn it over to Christina.
Good evening, Dr. Trujillo, governing board members. I am Christina Grabowski, and I am the program coordinator for school community services, and I supervise the enrollment ambassadors. So we currently are up to full staff. We have 7 enrollment ambassadors. Our newest one did start last Monday, so he has hit the ground running, and that is Frank Carney. He's part of Region 1. And then Maria Lizardo Gomez has been with us since the beginning of May in 2021. And then we do have also 2 ambassadors for Santa Cruz, Sonia Valencia and Melissa Stark. And then Region 3, Region 4, and Region 5, they only have 1 ambassador. And that was agreed upon per the ambassadors themselves, that Region 1 and Region 2 did need the extra support. So therefore, that is why you do have 2 ambassadors for those 2 particular regions. One of the team goals that they had this year is that to go through and refresh themselves with some trainings that they had received prior to when they first started in May 2021. And so some of the departments you see up there, they had initial training, and now they're in the process of getting refresher trainings, especially considering the fact that we did have a new ambassador start a week ago. And then we also have new departments that they're getting training from, MTSS, Student Relations, the switch in TUVA. And then we do have Frank Armenta, the new assistant superintendent. So they have been going through and making sure that they're meeting with as many departments as they can, because that's their job, is to make sure that they have information from across the district so that they can assist families. So their focus area, so they started in May in 2021. So they are about 18 months into their program. And so for our year 1 families, so they go through and they receive 4 contacts throughout their first year in the district. And so that is either a phone call, an email, a text. They do get letters or postcards so that they have that personal contact from somebody in the district. The Synergy team did go through and create them. It's called the Ambassador tab, and so that they can keep track of all of their contacts. So when they go through and do the reporting to senior leadership, they have hard numbers because they know exactly how many families they have contacted. They have been sending out surveys, so those are both exit surveys and customer satisfaction surveys so that they can get more data. And because of the fact our goal is to be 100% doing online registration this year, they've been helping families create their parent view accounts. And then schools need birth certificates within 30 days, so they have been assisting schools with that, and then also getting the proof of residency. And then they are an advocate for families. So if we have new families coming in that have specific needs, then that is their job to make sure that those needs are being met. So as our families go into year 2, they are not left behind. They still have a minimum of 2 contacts with an enrollment ambassador. So that is the same phone calls or emails or surveys. They still have that personal contact. They still go through and use the Synergy tab. So again, anytime we ask how many families have we contacted, we can just go ahead and run that report. And then they had a survey also sent to them, and then they are still being the advocate for the family. So after their first year in the district, is everything going okay, or do you need adjustments within potentially your school selection? And so they also do go through and make phone calls to our withdrawn families so that we can provide data to certain departments saying, you know, this is why we left. Is there somehow that we can actually get you back into the district? So is there a pathway that we can get those families back? And so again, within that ambassador tab, we can go through and determine how many students have withdrawn. And based upon the code that is in the system, we know, did they move to another school, or do we really not know where they actually went? And so the ambassadors, not only do they help families specifically, but they also do assist schools. They have their own dedicated email address, and that is enroll@TUSD1.org. So because of the fact we have 7 ambassadors, 1 is assigned each day, so that there is usually parents are answered within an hour of getting that email, so that it's that contact and that it's a quick contact. They do go through and assist families with making school selections. So they may want a school that potentially has a wait list. They will go through and find them various options. Family and community engagement did start doing new family mixers, so the ambassadors were present at those mixers. And part of my request for them is, since they're assigned by region, I asked them to come up with something about their region. What is significant about Santa Cruz? What is significant about Pantano? And they came up with games that they could play with the families to engage them in that region. Region 1 and Region 2, they do a lot of cafecitos, which are based out of the schools. We also attend the district events for back to school or OLRs. I know on Sunday, some of the ambassadors are going to Cyclovia to assist some of the schools. We did attend the Arizona Bilingual Back to School, the Love of Literacy. We will be attending the School Choice Fair, which is on November 9th. All 7 ambassadors will be there so that our families can apply for magnet schools. And then this year, I know Reem is putting on kinder fairs, and so all the enrollment ambassadors will also be there so that they can register our kids for next year coming out of preschool.
Thank you. And we'll hear from Leslie now on communications and the upcoming school year.
Good evening and thank you. So we'll make this fairly quick because a lot of this we have done before, but we do have some new things. So as Christina mentioned, we do promote and participate in a number of events throughout the year. Arizona Bilingual Back to School has about 5,000 people that attend it. So we also participate in that, hand out information about our schools, as well as having the ambassadors there. The School Choice Fair will be starting to be promoted. I believe it's this weekend. That's our big kickoff to really registration season, trying to get everybody to start getting into our schools, pick their application schools if they have some, or just enroll for the next year in general so we can get people coming. We've added a new event in December for our middle schools and high schools. It'll be a middle school, high school expo where all of our schools will be there and we'll invite families down. It'll be at the TCC and with CTE programs and stuff to get families engaged and looking forward as to what we can offer. Some of the other things, we continue to advertise TV, radio, English, Spanish. We have started to do some more campaigns with Cox. So that's exciting for us this year. We haven't really explored our partnership with them until this year. They have some different interview type of programs that that our TUVA program has participated on. And we'll also have some registration interviews as well as KOLD has an interview program that TUVA has participated in, and both were very successful and have a pretty broad reach. We also have, as we come through some of our own events, we've been tested last year having some of our radio personnel come out and be live at the event. They help attract people to the event because they're talking about what's happening right then, and also just having the speakers out on the street attracts people to make stop by and see things. So that's something new that we're doing. And this year we'll also be testing putting advertisements on grocery cart shopping carts. So that will be a little bit different for us, as well as we had the funds, and so we're mailing out 55,000 postcards to non-TUSD families to let them know about our magnet and school choice fair that's coming up here in a couple weeks. On the right-hand side are just a couple ideas of what some of our advertisements look like. As you'll see, the black, red, and yellow will carry through as go. There we go, to our district website. It has been updated and we're continuing to update it. On our district website, starting on November 7th, we will have, as like we did last year, specific pages for registration, helping new families, current families, or families who might be interested in exploring another school to look at what their options are and walk them through the steps to go through Parent View. Also, the same takes place on school websites, and on the top of every school website, we do promote the events that are coming up, and then we have similar looking registration pages if you were clicking on the registration button. So what do we have coming up for this coming year? As we've talked about, on November 7th is when open enrollment starts for our district. And then we have the Magneton School Choice Fair on November 9th, right after opening. We do are making a change in that we are eliminating our paper-based enrollment applications where possible. So everything will be online. That will help us in processing time and making sure we're getting all the documents we need from families. We're excited about the upcoming board-approved changes to TUVA and COLE and how we start to promote those. And we are doing some targeted marketing campaigns. We started doing TUVA the last few weeks and really pushing out, all that it can be and how we are different because we have teacher-led instruction, which most online programs do not have. We will push out a kinder enrollment fair that will be coming up in November, as well as tonight we had the college fair that is the first time we've had it back since pre-pandemic. I understand from my team that it was very well attended, very busy. And then we'll also be pushing out information about credit recovery programs, as those programs are start to set up in our high schools, and how we can support our students so they don't need to go to charter schools if they need to do credit recovery. What are next steps? Obviously, open enrollment, implementing all the changes. We have our upcoming district-wide and school-specific campaigns and community events that we do a lot of November through March. And we will start to look at what the census data has available to us. Unfortunately, it's been delayed until next summer of 2023. But as soon as we can get that, we'll use that to our advantage and take information from that. And then in February, we'll be back to present our 100th day enrollment information so we can see where we landed for the year. And with that, that should be it, although it doesn't want to end. Any questions?
Okay, board members, questions? Okay, Ms. Shaw.
Thank you, and thank you for the presentation. If we go back to the advertisements.
Sure.
So, we have some serious issues with students leaving our district, and I just think that our advertisements, they're a little bit vague, and the language isn't really enticing enough for anyone who sees it to be like, hey, I'm going to register my kid in TUSD. I think that we should put forward and highlight or showcase the things within our district that no other district is really doing, like our fine arts programs, music, our bilingual schools, all the interscholastic opportunities, maybe list the diverse clubs that we have available, because some of this language, just award-winning schools, diverse community, it's not enough to get people to want to enroll. I don't know if there's any ability to revamp these flyers before the 55,000 postcards go out, or the shopping cart stuff goes out, but we have to really be persuasive with these advertisements, and I'm not persuaded by this language, even the coloring, and I think there's a lot more that we can do to bring students in within these advertisement opportunities. Is there any
Sure.
wiggle room?
So we do specifically target our fine arts types of people through some of the programs that they might attend. So Broadway in Tucson, anything that goes throughout the community that is music oriented. We do have specific ads towards those people. So that is something that we do. We can certainly look at changing them up. It's not a problem. We just, this is where we've started, but are happy to take your suggestions and see if we can come up with some additional things with other types of targeting.
Yeah, just because I don't think we should just target let's give these certain people that want fine arts, let's target them with the fine arts ads. I think every family wants fine arts and would be, persuaded if they saw that. So like across the board, you know what I mean? If we can.
Sure.
Thank you.
Any other questions? I like that you're geo-targeting. I think that that's nice. I also love pictures of students. So as I guess on my algorithm, my stuff is no longer preschool. Now I'm getting high school and JTED stuff. So I appreciate that. I think that it, you know, I always like seeing more pictures, but a lot of the ads have that as well. All right. Thank you. Let me see. Hang on a second. Let me, what are we doing here? Oh, it's just a study, right? It's study? Okay, great.
And I have one more question.
Oh, I'm sorry.
if I
Go
may.
ahead.
To the enrollment ambassador about that. So, thank you. From your presentation, it seemed like there's a lot of data that we can perhaps use that the enrollment ambassadors are collecting, or just in their everyday work, we have some information that maybe we can use to boost those enrollment numbers up. Can we get a presentation on, like, especially the surveys of families who leave, maybe what has been collected?
Absolutely. So they actually just presented to SLT today, and then they're going to present at leadership next week also on Thursday, but we're more than happy to send you their PowerPoint that they've put together. And it does have some of the specific reasons as to why families are leaving, and it's also specific reasons why they're coming to TUSD also.
Okay, that would be great. Thank you so much.
Any other questions? I think that's it. Thank you. And now we are ready. We addressed 9.3 earlier in the meeting. Now we're at 9.4, TUSD CTE Facilities Improvement Initiative. Dr. Trujillo.
Yes, President Grijalva, board members, we've got Mr. McCollum, Chuck McCollum here, our senior coordinator for CTE programs in the district, with, I think, some really good news, a celebration of CTE in our district, a reinvestment in some of our carry forward funds that's going to be felt across our high school campuses. Mr. McCollum?
Okay, President Grijalva,
Nice to
members
see
of the
you,
board.
sir.
Good to see you.
In person.
I know.
It's been a while.
I did see you at graduation, but
You
yes,
did.
it's nice to see you.
It's good to end the evening on a real positive note, and so I'd like to talk to you tonight about our CTE program enhancements. It's safe to say that our enhancements begin in the summer of the previous year, because when we're looking at enhancing classrooms, we can't do it when the kids are there. So we start in the summer prior to school year 2023. Let's see if I can move this. There we go. All right, TUSD, just CTE, let me give you a few facts about those. We have 27 unduplicated programs. You'll see them there on your left. All in all, we have 67 duplicated, which means we have 6 automotive programs within our district. Okay, so those are unduplicated. We have them at 10 high school sites, and we service 7,240 high school students, and they participate in all of our CTE programs. So you can see we're a big part of our high school students' college and career goals. They love them. They're great programs. Whoops. Let's look quickly at our enhancements. We were able to do a lot of things, and I'll tell you quite honestly why. When we were going through the COVID years, we obviously didn't spend a whole lot of money. Okay, we were mostly virtual. Then we came back last year, and we kind of kept things a little bit status quo. So we were able to roll some funding over to be able to make some serious enhancements last year. As you can see, we started off in technology. Now, technology is a combination of different things. It could be instructional, which you will see as like a Z-Space instructional 3D technology, or a new line display, or it could be a lab refresh. All in all, we refreshed 8 labs in 8 different schools, and we made 7 instructional enhancements just in technology alone. We were able to get our teachers in the CMT, which is our media programs, all new MacBook Pros, and our computer science, machining, and engineering instructors were upgraded PC laptops. You'll ask, why do we do that? Well, we do it because the programs they run cannot be run on what we provide as a district. Okay, when you're looking at SolidWorks or you're looking at Adobe, those are programs that we need upgraded technology for. Classroom remodels. We're finishing up right now the Catalina Culinary Facility. We're actually, it should be done, but we're waiting on the air conditioning unit. It's supposed to arrive in the next couple days. It's been on hold for about 3 months. Catalina Construction, we're looking at upgrading their plumbing facility. We're putting in a brand new program at Saguaro, pharmacy support. I wish I just got the pictures today of what that room will look like. Troy Sports Medicine, a program that grew from 54 students 4 years ago to 214. Dr. Colazzo has done a wonderful job out there, and Jenny Adams in building that program. So we're going to enhance that room. We just need to. And then THMS, Tucson High's Film and TV, whose students just won an Emmy. Okay, a student Emmy. So we're going to upgrade that film and TV studio over there. Classroom and lab upgrades. CTE is a beast all of its own. Okay, it's a combination of instructional and operational. So in other words, when you take your car in to get fixed, if you walk into one of our automotive shops, you're going to see the same equipment that you saw where you took your car to get fixed. May not be as fancy, but it's going to be the same equipment. So it takes a beating. So we changed some classroom furniture out in our welding at Choya, our automotive at Choya, our automotive at Rincon. We did start Rincon Film and TV with new furniture. Started the process at THMS. Saguaro Automotive, we are replacing the bay doors. And one interesting note on the bay doors, after discussions with risk management, we are putting in bay doors that have a button so that if a student with a disability gets trapped, is able to push the button and the bay door will rise. Okay, also put in a new alignment rack and drill press. Some of these are done since I put this together. So Santa Rita Bioscience, ice machine and a hood, an air compressor. We got fluid exchangers, which is helping us do dual credit, refrigerators, microbiology, biological incubators, plasma cutting systems. These are all really nice pieces of equipment. They're expensive, I'm not gonna lie to you, but they're great. Kids love them. Now, how do we purchase all this? Our funding is allocated from 3 sources. We receive JTED funding, we receive Carl Perkins funding, and we receive priority grant funding. Okay, JTED funding is based on our students' participation in our CTE programs. Perkins is a grant, and that's complicated. I'm not going to go through all of that. Now, priority funding is a maintenance of effort by the state. Each source is used to fund department needs based on allowable expense. For example, I could buy an alignment rack at Rincon High School with Perkins money, but I can't install it with Perkins money. So I have to turn around and use JTED money to install it. So when we do a project, we look at each funding source strength, and we use that to fund the entire project. So when you look at what we're going to do at Choya in sports medicine, part of the funding will come from JTED, part of it will come from Perkins, and part of it will come from priority. It's using each funding source as its strength to best benefit the program, okay? Total funding that we spent, this is amazing, and I can't tell you that it's going to happen every year. But we dropped almost $2.3 million on classroom enhancements for our CTE programs, which will help benefit our students and get them through the programs and help our teachers, okay, more than anything else. So we're really proud of this. The pictures you see on the screen are of our sports medicine program at Choya High School. Phenomenal job up there. So that's where we're at right now. So any questions?
Any questions, board members? Thank you for the presentation. I love hearing about what is going on our campuses.
My pleasure.
And we get
Thank you.
asked often, so it's good for us to have information.
Good, good.
Any, go ahead, Board Member Shaw.
Thank you, and thank you for the presentation. So I have a question, well, maybe two questions. So what are the class sizes like at the moment, like kind of ballpark across the board? Like, are we at like the cap, or is there room for other students?
Oh, that's a great question. Okay. CTE programs work in a pyramid fashion. So when you're looking at your 1-2 classes, like your first year classes, those are quite large. Those will be in the 30, 35. But as you start moving up the ladder, let's say to the second, third, and fourth year, then they start to drop a little bit because the kids start to realize where they want to specialize. So an automotive program may go in 1-2 with 2 sections of 35, so say 70 kids. Then move to 30 to 35 kids in the second. By the time they get to that fourth year kid, you're looking at 15 to 20 kids that really want to be in automotive. Okay, and so you kind of think of it, I'll be honest with you, you kind of think of it as an AP class because that's what those kids want to do for the next 30 years of their life. Okay, so it does. Our freshman enrollment, which a lot of districts do not allow because they don't garner funding, JTED funding, only sophomores, juniors, and seniors garner funding. We put it in there because we believe that college and career pathways, career exploration needs to happen at a young age. So we allow our freshmen into those classes. Some of them drop, some of them stay. Some of them find that this is something they want to do for the rest of their life.
Okay, interesting. And I asked that because looking at a previous item about graduation requirements, I noticed that there's 1 credit required, and that's for fine arts or career technical vocational education. And so I wonder if if we were to require 1 credit of CTE as well as 1 credit of fine arts, like split, so students would have to maybe explore something. Those students who might, take fine arts because it seems a little bit like an easier grade and, are directionless, maybe they would find direction if we required 1 credit of CTE. What do you feel about that? Would it flood the system?
No. It would never flood the system. We'll figure it out. Okay, I'll be straight up honest with you. There are some districts that do require 1 year of career technical education for their students for that purpose of career exploration. I'm biased. I'm going to tell you straight up, I would go for that in a heartbeat. And we'll figure out a way to make it happen, but that's your all decision, okay? But you would have my support if you went with it.
Okay, I would definitely support that. And also, is there no CTE, like, kind of like an introductory course, like a pre-introductory course in our middle schools?
That's a tough one, and I will tell you that Ms. Hewitt, Ms. Aranda, and I have been talking about that. Our funding sources are tight. They don't allow us to really spend the money on a program in the middle school area. Now, we can reach out with certain things, like, for example, construction days. Construction career days is next week. We're going to send 4 or 5 middle schools to that, okay? We'll pay for the transportation, get them over there. That is something we can do, but our funding sources do not allow, say, for us to put in computer science and fund that. And that is where we're having just a little bit of difficulty, is trying to get that pathway to where you're going through middle school and it flows right into high school. But we're kind of stuck there.
Yeah. Well, perhaps we could do a summer course or something like that in our middle schools so that we can, provide some exploration to those students and keep those enrollment levels up. But
no, I think that's a good idea. I think that if we look at it from a high school standpoint, those kids moving into high school, we do offer, and I'm going to use Cholla High School again, we do offer a summer program where it's a middle school, well, not a middle school, I'm sorry, it's a medical exploration type class that they run during their summer school that kids can take part in. So it is something to think about, to get we really do need to get our middle schools involved.
Okay. Dr. Trujillo.
I know in Phoenix at another time when funding was a better place, there was more funding for ninth grade CTE. And that's something that's been a hot topic at the legislature, is lobbying for more money for ninth grade CTE courses where you can offer a career seminar. And that's something that the high school that I worked at when I was a site administrator, that was a great course. Every single freshman came in and they had to take 1 semester of career seminar, which was a survey of interests of all the existing CTE programs in the district. And then you balance that with a semester of PE, which is a requirement anyway, so you got the full year. Unfortunately, funding has dried up. We don't have that capacity anymore, but we really want to hook in as many kids as possible into these CTE programs. And we've done a phenomenal job here in TUSD. We're over 7,000 strong. We're one of the largest CTE districts in the state. And 5 or 6 years ago, it wasn't the case. So that's a credit to Mr. McCollum, our CTE teachers, and the moves that the board has made over the years to invest in CTE. But just a word on Perkins Grant, and I know you didn't want to get into all that. That actually involves a concept called completers. So we get, the amount of money that we get from that grant is proportionate to the amount of students that we actually get certified through an entire program. So once we do have a student go into CTE, the goal is to get them to complete the whole program, 2-3 years of coursework. When we only have a kid that does a CTE course for 1 year and then they don't continue on, we don't see the payout from Perkins Grant funds. So it's all about completion. When we get kids in culinary, when we get kids in automotive, when we get kids in welding, we want to hook them in that freshman year and get them started on that course completion, that everybody wins when we can get that course completion.
Okay, any other questions? I do want to ask us to look at consent item 6.3. My understanding is the dates are incorrect, so while it's still here and on our agenda, I'd like to make sure that we approve the correct dates. Thank you, Mr. McCollum.
Thank you.
So the approval for the mariachi conference, the dates were changed, and I guess this is now done, a done deal, but it's April 18th through the 22nd, as opposed to, what were the dates? I think it was 24 or something like that. Hang on. Yeah, 24 to 28. It's April 18th to the 22nd. So I'm wondering if we can change that date. And just that was a unanimous vote. So do I need to make a motion and redo it, or just acknowledge that we're going to change those dates?
I would, if it were me, I'd probably ask for unanimous consent to make that revision.
Okay. Is anyone opposed to making that change? Everyone approve that? Okay, great. So it'll be April 18th to the 22nd on item 6.3, the very bottom of page 4. Okay. Yes.
Going back, you know, things happen so fast sometimes, and I didn't realize that with the dress code, we weren't sending it out for a first read for the public. Are we able to vote on that so it can be?
My understanding was we were going to have, Dr. Trujillo, you were going to look at it, because the thought was, instead of putting it out for changes on that specific item, that it was going to be more of a change in regulation. So central enforcement of it. And then if there are any changes to the policy, that you would bring that back. Is that did I understand that?
That's correct. The administrative recommendation, and we kind of had an agreement, just hearing the public comment, we'll develop the regulation and we'll bring it back publicly. That go through the regulation development process, bring it back publicly, walk the board through it. Normally, regulations are developed administratively, but because we know that this is a hot topic, this one we want to make sure that we're getting plenty of board input before we enact it and put it before our administrators.
And perhaps on that one item, at the very beginning, I think it said every school would have their own, or there was some verbiage there that the policy might have to come back if it's be more centrally controlled. So if there's any changes, they'll come back and then we'll put it back out.
Okay.
Yeah, because I don't think we voted for any major changes, but it was just, there was going to be regulation. But I do think if we're going to enforce that centrally that it will have to come back so we can make some changes to the policy.
Okay.
Okay, yeah, thanks. All right, I think that is, let's see, hang on, let me go to the bottom. We have future meeting dates, agenda items. Dr. Trujillo, anything to add to that one, 10.1?
No, just for all of our employees that tuned in, tonight was a study session for compensation, compression, and proposed bus driver salary and compensation packages. We will be back with an action item. We're not going to keep everybody in suspense very long. So it will either be the next board, it'll be a board meeting in November, either the next one or the final one.
Okay, and then we do still have an item on executive session that we need to go back to address, and so I'm hoping it won't be that long, but if we're going to go ahead and do that, and then we'll adjourn from executive session. Okay,
Could I
does
add-
that make sense? Go ahead, Ms. Shaw.
Oh, thank you. I would like to add something to a future agenda.
To 10.1?
Yes.
Yes, go ahead.
I would like to add the formation of a school safety oversight board committee, please.
Okay. All right. Any other items? Okay, so we're going to go ahead and adjourn and reconvene in executive session, and then we'll adjourn from executive session.
Need a motion to adjourn the executive session?
No, I don't believe so. Yeah, okay, thank you. Have a good night. Thanks for your attention.